Good morning, everyone. My name is Councillor Paul Ainsley, and I am the chair of the General Government and Licensing Committee. The city clerk has confirmed that we have quorum, so I would like to call meeting number 32 to order. As I call it to order, I would just like to take a moment to thank all of the clerk staff, and especially, in particular, Matthew Green, all of the clerk staff, the IT department, the members of the committee. This is our last scheduled meeting for this term. So I'd just like to take a moment and thank everybody for all of their hard work and dedication and support of the General Government Licensing Committee as we got through an unprecedented time with the pandemic. I think we've had a very fruitful and hardworking committee. And once again, would just like to thank everybody for their work and dedication. Saying that,
just want to thank you, Mr. Chair, for your extremely collaborative approach, and really appreciate, always all your efforts to, accommodate all of the members of committee and checking beforehand on any issues we might have, and just an all-around terrific job. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fillion. I really appreciate that. Today's meeting is being held with members of council and city staff participating by both video conference and in person at City Hall in the council chamber. City Hall is open to the public, and anyone who is welcome to attend the meeting in the council chamber at City Hall today. The public may continue to participate electronically via video conference and can watch this meeting live at youtube.com/Toronto City Council Live. The clerk staff have connected registered speakers to the meeting by video conference, and the list of speakers can be viewed online by visiting the General Government Licensing Committee's page at toronto.ca/council and clicking the speakers box for today's meeting. I ask for everyone's patience if we experience any delays or technical problems during the meeting. The city's clerk has provided all agenda materials on toronto.ca/council and on the clerk's meeting portal. Clerk's IT staff will be available for members in the chamber and remotely if you need help with your electronic devices. Members, when voting on an item or a motion, I ask that you keep your video on and raise your hand to indicate your vote. Members, I want to remind you that you must still submit and approve your motions by email. Staff are available at gglc@toronto.ca to help with motions. For our land acknowledgement this morning, I would like to state that although we're in different locations and meeting remotely today, the committee would like to acknowledge the land we're meeting on is the traditional territories of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We also acknowledge Toronto is covered by Treaty Number 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. At this point, I'm going to ask if there's any declarations of interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act. Seeing none, can I have a motion to confirm the minutes of our meeting on June 7th, 2022? Councillor Holidays moving, Deputy Mayor Holidays moving adoption of the minutes from June 7th, 2022. All in favor? And that carries. We're just going to run through the agenda. Let me get my other package. All right, our first item was deferred from our June 7th meeting. GL 32.1 is a supplementary report, no fault grant for basement flooding damages. Councillor Nunziata, do you want to hold this item?
Yes.
Speaker Nunziata?
Yes, please. I have a motion I'm going to move. Thank you.
Okay. Did you want to move that now, or did you have questions of staff?
I'll move it later. Thank you.
Okay. All right. We'll hold number one in Speaker Nunziata's name. Number two is a 9:45 hearing, apportionment of property taxes for July 4th, 2022. I will hold that in my name. Number three is cancellation, reduction, or refund of property taxes for July 4th, 2022. It's a hearing scheduled for 9:45. We do have one deputant. Number 4 is an amendment to contract 470-23290 with CBCI Telecom Canada Incorporated for the supply, delivery, installation, and warranty of audiovisual related products and services. Does anybody like to hold number 4? Have somebody move the recommendations in number 4?
I'll move it, Mr. Chair. Stephen Holiday.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Holidays. Moving the recommendations in number 4. All in favor? That carries. Number 5 is an amendment to blanket contract number 470-22854 with Geotab Incorporated for the provision of Telematics solution. We have a recommendation before us. Would somebody like to move the recommendation?
I'll move it, Mr. Chair. Stephen Holiday.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Holiday. All in favor? The recommendations in number 5 carry. GL 32.6, amendment to blanket contract numbers 470-23836 and 470-23838 with Goodyear Canada Incorporated for the standardization of tire purchases across the citywide fleet.
I'll move the recommendation. Councillor Nunziata.
Thank you, Deputy. Thank you, Speaker Nunziata. All in favor of the recommendations? That carries. Number 7, amendment to non-competitive purchase order number 6050581 for the shoring of the existing roof structure of the Scarborough Gardens Arena. I will move the recommendations. All in favor? And that carries. Number 8 is an amendment to non-competitive bridge contract numbers 470-23523 and 470-23972 with Anronn Electric Motor Repair for electrical pump and motor services at city facilities. If nobody has any holds, could I have someone move the recommendations?
I can move, Mr. Chair. Stephen Holiday.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Holiday. All in favor of the recommendations? That carries. GL 32.9 is the 2021 Annual Controllers Report.
Hold, Councillor Filion.
Councillor Filion is holding number 9. Number 10 is Category Management and Strategic Sourcing Update number 3. If nobody wants to hold this, I do have an amendment. I think it's fairly non-controversial. Matthew, if I can have it put on the screen. My amendment's on the screen. The City Council requests the City Manager to ensure all City divisions commence discussions with the Category Management Strategic Sourcing Team no later than the 4th quarter of 2022. City Council direct the Controller to report back to the appropriate standing committee in the 2nd quarter of 2023 and provide an update and a roadmap of all City divisions discussions with the Category Management Strategic Sourcing Team. All those in favor? Carried. Item is amended. All those in favor? Carried. Number 11 is the non-union separation costs for 2021. Have somebody receive this for information? Councillor Mantas? All those in favor? Carried. Number 12, non-competitive contracts with SAP Canada Incorporated for proprietary system software services and licenses.
I'll hold that.
Councillor Filion is holding number, 12. Number 13 is a non-competitive contract with Ernst & Young LLP for the provision of an integrated risk management solution. Moved by Councillor Matlow. All in favor? And that carries. Number 14, non-competitive contract with iLookabout for the subscription and use of their real property tax analytics software platform. Somebody like to move the recommendations?
I'll move it.
Thank you, Speaker Nunziata. All in favor? Carried. Number 15, 705 Progress Avenue, designation of a portion of the property as a municipal capital facility. This is in my ward. I'm very happy to move the recommendations in this. All in favor? And that carries. Number 16 is 756 Bathurst Street, designation as a municipal capital facility.
I'll move it.
Speaker Nunziata is moving the recommendations to number 16. All in favor? Carried.
Mr. Chair,
number-
can I just have a point of order just for a second?
Yeah.
229, I need to declare an interest.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Councillor Mantas. I made a note of that. Number 17, Indigenous Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship and Incubator and Tenancy Program and head lease terms. I will move the recommendations in that. All in favor? That carries. Number 18 is a below market lease agreement with selected nonprofit childcare operator in the East Bayfront, 775 Edgewater Drive in Ward 10.
I'll move it.
Speaker Nunziata is moving the recommendations in number 18. All in favor? And that carries. Number 19 is bulk room accommodations agreement at 3 Park Home Avenue in Ward 18. Councillor Filion, did you want to hold that?
Yes, please.
Thank you. Number 20 is a nominal lease agreement with the Ontario Tennis Association at Allen East District in Ward 6. We do have a registered speaker. I will hold that in my name. Number 21 is transfer of Strata property to Build Toronto for 1978 to 2002 Lakeshore Boulevard West in Ward 4. Sorry, Matthew, is there a technical amendment for 21?
Yes, Mr. Chair. So there is the transmittal from Create TO from the board in 21A, which is a sub-item. There is the confidential disposition, or the disposition of the confidential information. If you'd like to move that, we can just put that up on the screen.
Yep, I will move all of that as, can I do as a package, or it has to be done individually?
Let's vote on this, and then we can do item as amended, please.
Okay, so we have an item, a motion on the screen. All in favor? Carried. Item as amended. All in favor? And that carries. Thank you, Matthew. Number 22, lease of an unopened portion of Murray Ross Parkway to Toronto and Region Conservation Authority. This is in Ward 7. All in favor of the motion, recommendations? That carries. Number 23, license agreement, land exchange of 1700 Keele Street and 15 Rotherham Avenue in Ward 5. There is a recommendation before us.
Yes, I'll move
Anybody
it.
like to? Thank you. Speaker Nunziata is moving the recommendation. All in favor? That carries. Number 24, Parkdale Hub, acquisition of the 1337 Queen Street West in Ward 4. There's a confidential attachment with this. I will move the recommendations. All in favor? That carries. Number 25 is the Midtown Toronto Storm Sewer Relief Project. This is a Stage 1 expropriation report in Ward 8. Somebody like to move the recommendations?
I'll move it.
Moved by Speaker Nunziata. All in favor? Carried. Item number 27, expropriation of a portion of 350 Progress Avenue for Toronto Paramedics Service Station access. This is a Stage 2
Mr. Chair.
expropriate.
I think, did we skip 3226?
Did I miss one?
Number 20, sorry,
26.
26, Scarlet Road.
My apologies.
26.
Thank you, Matthew.
Yes, so
Number 26, Scarlet Road Bridge Construction Project Expropriation, Stage 2,
Yeah.
which is in Ward 4 and 5. Speaker
Yes.
Nunziata.
I'll move it.
Thank you. Speaker Nunziata is moving the recommendations in GL 32.6. All in favor? Carried. 27, 32.27, expropriation of a portion of 350 Progress Avenue for Toronto Paramedic Service Station access. This is stage 2 expropriation in Ward 21. I will move the recommendations. All in favor? That carries. Number 28, expropriation of 81 Bloor Street East and 40/42 Hayden Street for the Bloor-Yonge Capacity Improvement Project, Stage 3 in Ward 11. There's a confidential attachment. I have somebody move the recommendations. Councillor Mantis moving the recommendations. All in favor? That carries. Number 29, extending the vehicle age limit for accessible taxi cabs. There's deputations on this, so I will hold it in my name.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Matthew.
I just recall earlier, Councillor Mantis had let us know that he had an interest on the item. This is a time for him to actually declare what his interest is on the item, and we know that he's going to send us his written version as well.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
If Councillor Mantis is available to...
I think he turned his video off.
I turned off my video. Family member of mine has a taxi fleet.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Mantis. Number 30, update on the confirmation programs remediation plans for city IT's divisions, agencies, and corporations. There is a confidential attachment to this.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to move it Stephen Holiday.
All right, Deputy Mayor Holiday is moving the recommendations in number 30. All in favor? Carried. GL 32.31, status of outstanding payments in lieu of tax amounts for federal, provincial, and municipal properties. Can I have somebody move the recommendation in this?
I'll move it.
Speaker Nunziata is moving receipt. All in favor? That carries. Number 32 is the 2021 Annual Human Rights Office Report. There's a deputation on this one. I will hold it in my name. Number 32 is Occupational Health and Safety Report for the year ending 2021. Can I have somebody move receipt of the report?
Mr. Chair, may I actually request to hold the item?
All right.
I have some questions that will be similar to number 31. So hopefully staff are available for both.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Deputy Mayor Holiday. And number 34 is next steps for Casa Lomas north of Austin Terrace properties, creating a public vision for a public heritage site. And I have a deputant on this, so I will hold that one in my name.
No, I believe the deputant withdrew.
Matthew, I still have a
Sorry,
deputant listed on.
My apologies, Mr. Chair. We have a deputant listed on GL 3234.
Oh,
So
Yeah, that's what I thought.
oh, I thought you told me they withdrew. Oh, okay, sorry. Sorry, Matthew. Okay, thank you.
Not a problem. And the last item on our agenda is GL 32.35, proposed N-Wave geothermal district energy system, Bloor and Kipling in Ward 3. There's a confidential attachment to this. Would somebody like to hold it or move the recommendations?
Mr. Chair. Sorry.
Yes, sir.
I had sent you an email about this. There was a request from staff for a technical amendment on this. Would you mind holding this and you and I can discuss what they needed?
Yep, not a problem.
Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew. All right,
And Mr. Chair, I'm wondering if you could do 32.19 last. I'm still trying to work out some wording of motions with members of staff, so hoping we don't get to it too quickly.
Okay, why don't I check on you when we get there and see if you're ready. If not, we can continue to hold it down.
Okay, thank you.
So, Mr.
All
Chair.
right, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Chair, it's Councillor Nunziata. So on
Yes.
number 1, I could move my motion and Matthew would be option 3. So I'm moving
Okay.
option 3 in the report.
All right.
We'll put
Matthew,
the
could we have option number 3 on the
3.
screen?
It's
Just
on
so
the
everybody sees it. Okay, does anybody have any questions of the mover? Seeing no questions of the mover, all in favor?
To speak, Chair? Mr. Chair,
Sorry.
may I speak?
Deputy Mayor Holliday to speak.
I'm not going to support the motion, and it's not because I'm unsympathetic to the people in Rockcliffe or Councillor Nunziata, who's trying to help them out, but my comment is that I've got people in Ward 2 as well that have the same issues with flooding as do others. And so as laudable as it is to help somebody in one ward, I can't leave out others, including my own. So I won't be supporting the motion. May I have a recorded vote?
Okay. Sorry, Speaker Nunziata, do you want to speak to the motion at all, or you're fine?
Well, just briefly to Councillor Holliday, as you know, we've been working on this project for over 20 years. And they've started the project, and because we've had a number of VAs, it's been delayed for a number of years, and that's why my motion. And it is a priority on the staff's list. So I'm asking members to please support option 3 for me. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Speaker Nunziata. Other speakers on this item? Seeing none, we have a motion on the screen from Councillor Nunziata. Deputy Mayor Holliday, you asked for a recorded vote.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair. I just have to be on the recorded side, opposed.
Yeah, not a problem.
Okay.
All in favor of the motion on the screen, please raise your hand so Matthew can record a vote.
Yep, so all in favor is Chair Ainsley, Councillor Fillion, Councillor Mantis, Councillor Nunziata, Councillor Matlow. All opposed? Deputy Mayor Holliday. Mr. Chair, that vote is 5 in favor and 1 opposed. That motion carries.
Okay. Do we have to do item as amended?
No, we don't, because the item was to receive for information.
That
so
was
that
an
is
option.
adopted as amended. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Matthew. So I am going to deal with our first 2 statutory timed items first. So our first one is GL 32.2, apportionment of property taxes as of July 4th, 2022 hearing. I believe there are no registered deputants, Matthew?
Not on this item, no.
All right, so we have our recommendations before us from the controller. I will move the recommendation before us. All in favor? And that carries. Next, our next item is GL 32.3. Sorry, just scrolling through. Cancellation, reduction, or refund of property taxes as of July 4th, 2022. This is a public hearing. Sorry, I have a speakers list. I have 1 registered speaker, Mr. Andrew Lee. Matthew, is Mr. Lee available?
Mr. Lee is in the chamber with us here. He's just approaching the speaker's dais.
All right. Good morning, Mr. Lee. Before you begin, I just want to let you know that you have 5 minutes to speak, as I'm sure our city clerk has told you. You have 5 minutes to speak. Each member of the committee has 5 minutes to ask you questions. From there, we can take it into what we call taking it back into committee, where each member of the committee can ask city staff up to questions for up to 5 minutes on this item, and then we have up to 5 minutes each to speak on this. So, Mr. Lee, you have 5 minutes to begin whenever you're ready.
All right. Good morning, members of the committee. I'm Andrew Lee. I am the spouse of the owner of 73 Marmion Avenue, which is a residential property. I'm here today in regards to an appeal of the decision not to reduce the taxes for year 2020. Our property was completely destroyed by fire May 17th, 2017, and was rendered unusable and unlivable up until September 2021. We had previously applied for reduction of the taxes for the years 2018 and 2019, and we were successful in that regard, just paying the taxes on the assessment value of the land only without a structure. We began commencement of the rebuilding in 2018, and the house was substantially completed September 2021, and we moved back in. But definitely for the year 2020, we were not living at the property, and the house was in a partial state of construction, and it was unlivable and not being used. So I believe that there was an error in terms of charging us the full assessed value for the year 2020. So I'm seeking a reduction of the taxes payable for 2020. We're prepared to pay the assessed value of the land only, and I believe that's fair. I might also add at this point that we had also applied for a reduction of the taxes payable for 2021, but I don't see that on today's agenda, so I'm assuming that that's something to be dealt with later. We did apply. I have copies of the applications for reduction and cancellation. This appeal is under Section 325 of the City of Toronto Act. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Lee. Are there questions of the deputy? So Mr. Lee, you've applied for a reduction in your property taxes for 2020 and also 2021?
That's correct.
And did you get a response from the city about your request for 2020?
The notice that we received, first a correspondence dated June 2nd, 2022, advising of the hearing date being today. And then subsequently, I did receive the notice of hearing. Actually, this does pertain to 2021. So there's nothing for 2020, it appears. So I've got, my apologies, I did get the dates mixed up. So today is for 2021, but I did not receive a notice for 2020.
Sorry, you haven't received a notice for 2020?
That's correct.
Okay. All right. All right. Thank you, Mr. Lee. Appreciate your time this morning. We're going to bring it into committee.
Mr. Chair,
If there's no further.
can I just ask for a repeat of the address because I didn't catch it?
Yes.
73.
Marmion Avenue. It's Marmion Avenue.
Thank you.
Okay. We're going to bring this into committee. Does anybody have questions of staff?
Yes, if I could ask a question to staff. So on this particular, for staff, is staff here? Oh, there you are, behind me. Okay. So if you can just give us an update, he indicated that there was a fire and.
Yes. And it appears through you, Mr. Chair, it appears that there is a recommendation in front of committee today that says a zero reduction to taxes. If in fact the property was vacant or because it had been destroyed by fire and was not constructed for 2020 or 2021. Sorry. Oh. Sorry. You can hear me now? Thanks. You can hear me now? That's better. So the applicant in this case, the applicant in this case has two options. We can either withdraw this item, adjourn this to a future meeting, the recommendation before committee, or the applicant can appeal the decision today. Yeah.
Speaker Nunziata, do you have more questions?
Okay.
No, that was it. Thank you.
Okay. Does anybody else on the committee have questions?
Mr. Chair, I'll take one.
Okay.
If we can get Mr.
Deputy
Brendan's.
Mayor Holliday?
Yeah, we'll give Mr. Brendan a second just to get his mic sorted out.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am advised that the recommendation before committee today is what was returned by MPAC for the property for 20 and 21. So the reduction that is recommended is no reduction in taxes, and that is why?
It's a vacant land, assessed as vacant land, no structure.
So the land is currently assessed as vacant land with no structure on it. That is the way it has been returned. That was the continued return. So the land is being valued as though it's vacant.
So I'll ask my follow-on questions, if I may, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, go ahead.
So just for the committee's clarity, the impact data shows that the land is vacant. If the property owner wants to dispute that or prove otherwise, and maybe they've got some evidence on that, what's the process for the committee to sort this out? Should we just stand it down and sort that out, or is there an easier way for us to deal with it? Because I guess we're at kind of like 11:59 with respect to the report here, the 11th hour.
Okay. So I'm being advised, Mr. Chair and Deputy Mayor Holliday, the advice is that we should adjourn this from this particular meeting. We'll adjourn this particular property from the recommendations in front of you and return at a future date that will allow us the opportunity to get back together with the property owner and with the MPAC to understand their recommendations. So the easiest thing is we'll prepare a motion, Matthew, to adjourn this particular item at this time.
Okay, so that can allow the property owner to deal with the 2020 matter and the 2021 matter, and there's no penalty to them other than, I guess, the time to sort this out.
Correct. We'll look at both, and if there's money due or property taxes due the applicant, the property owner in this case, that'll still come back to the owner.
Sorry, one other technical question. Do we know what ward this is in? I see it's North York.
Yes, this is Ward 8.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So we'll work on a motion and send it over to the clerk. Thanks.
Okay. Matthew, do you want me to hold this one down and move on to the next item?
I think that would be best. We'll work with staff here to get that motion.
Mr. Chair, if I may, if the applicant is here, Councillor Cole is the councillor of Ward 8, and it might just be good to make sure that's clear and probably the right contact to deal with ongoing on this matter.
Okay, thank you, Deputy Mayor Holliday. So our next item with registered deputants is GL 32.20 nominal lease agreement with the Ontario Tennis Association, Allen East District, and we have one registered deputant, Mr. Stephen Moranis. Matthew, is Mr. Moranis present or online?
Yes, Mr. Moranis is online. We're just promoting him now so he can speak.
Okay. Good morning, Mr. Moranis. You have 5 minutes to address the committee. Once you're done addressing the committee, each member of the committee has up to 5 minutes to ask you questions. Then we bring it back into what we call bringing it back into committee, where councillors can ask staff questions up to 5 minutes on this item and then speak to 5 minutes on this item if they so wish. You have 5 minutes to begin, Mr. Moranis, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can, loud and clear.
Okay, thank you so much. First of all, this is a project I've been taking the lead on for the Ontario Tennis Association for about 3 years, and I just want to give our thanks to CREM, especially Allison Filosi and Patrick Matuso, and Create TO, Don Logie, and gosh, I'm losing my memory. All the people at Create TO for helping us put this project together, and the nominal term lease and responsibilities and accountabilities. It's an exciting world-class facility that's going to be located in Ward 6 to promote the game of tennis recreationally. I just wanted to make the committee members aware that the Ontario Tennis Association is a nonprofit. This facility is not a private club. It will be public facility promoting the game of tennis. Obviously, part of it will be to promote elite tennis players such as Bianca and Dennis and Milos, who basically came through the OTA development programs. But more importantly, it's to promote the disadvantaged, inclusionary, equity issues of getting people the opportunity to play the game of tennis. And we're excited about working collaboratively with City of Toronto and Parks and Forestry and Recreation and CREM to finalize the ground lease once this has been approved, and it goes to full City Council for approval in July. And I'm here, I presented the clerk with a deck for the committee's, it's a design deck for the committee's information. And we're also, I mean, there's some final design elements that have to be included. And we're probably going to include pickleball, which has become more popular. So it'll be primarily tennis court facilities, indoor and outdoor, and probably pickleball, plus a ton of amenities for meeting space, event space, community functions, etc. And I just wanted to be available representing the Ontario Tennis Association if there's any questions, Mr. Chairman and committee members, on this project.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Morenas. Are there any questions of the deputant? Seeing none. And Mr. Morenas, staff did, I think there is an amendment to the recommendations. I don't know if you've seen the amendment or had discussions with staff about the amendment. Maybe Matthew, could we put the motion, amended motion, on the screen? Mr. Morenas, are you okay with the amendments?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, they have been disclosed to me, and I appreciate sort of that. As long as staff is fine, the OTA is fine on that. I'm 110% confident we're going to build this facility. You know, we've got potential private money as well as public money, federally and provincially. The facility will probably be in the neighborhood of $60 to $70 million. So I'm excited. I'm looking forward to getting the full committee and yourself, Mr. Chairman, and the mayor to come and help us cut the ribbon in roughly 4, 5, or 6 years. But I'm fine with those amendments, Mr. Chairman and honorable committee members.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Mr. Morenas. Does anybody have any questions of staff on this item?
Yes, I have one question.
Speaker Nunziata, question to staff.
Okay. So to city staff, just on recommendation 2, as far as the community access agreement, can you just elaborate a bit on that? Is that giving the opportunity for the community at large to use the facility?
Through Mr. Chair, it's Pat Matoso, Councillor Nunziata. I'm here in the chamber just behind you. Right. So the Ontario Association will allocate 15,000 square feet of space, and 50% of the programming is for community use. So there's two agreements that will be worked on once council approves the terms of reference. One is the lease and one is a community access agreement that we'll work closely with Parks, Forest and Recreation on.
Okay, thank you. That was my question.
Question, Mr. Chair?
Deputy Mayor Holliday?
The current lands, the lands that we're talking about, what is their current designation in terms of zoning or official plan? Can you just describe those to me?
Yeah. Through you, Mr. Chair, I'll ask Alison Felicia to provide that answer. Through you, Mr. Chair, Alison's not aware of the current zoning. It's part of the Allen East District Master Plan, and Creatio is leading that master plan. But I could get back to you on the proposed zoning.
Okay, Pat. I mean, my question's fairly general. They're not parklands. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So if they were parklands, would it be a different process before us?
Through you, Mr. Chair, absolutely, it would be a different process.
Okay, and that would involve parks and official plan and lots of different council approvals. So these are definitely not parklands, and hence the process that you've laid out in the report.
Through you, Mr. Chair, that is correct.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Deputy Mayor Holliday. Other questions of staff on this item? Seeing none, speakers on this item?
Mr. Chair, I'll just move the recommendation and the amendment as well.
Okay. Speaker Nunziata is moving the amendment and the recommendations. All in favor? And that carries. Thank you very much. Our next item, speakers list, sorry. Our next item is number 29, 32.29, extending the vehicle age limit for accessible taxi cabs. Councillor Mantis has declared a conflict of interest on this. We do have a speakers list on this item. Our first speaker is Ryan Bedard from Humberview Mobility. Matthew, is Mr. Bedard available?
Yeah, we are here.
Okay.
And we had a presentation. Are we allowed to show that, or?
Yes.
Okay, we'll bring that up. Actually, Rob Simon's going to start, and I will finish, so I will bring that up. And let us know when you can see the screen.
We've transferred over the presenter function to Ryan, I believe.
Yeah, it is, yeah.
Yep. So you can share your screen somewhere down at the bottom there.
Where it's there. There we go. And Rob Simon, my colleague, will be starting this up. So thank you for your patience and thank you for having us. And as soon as this extends, okay, Rob, there you go.
Good morning. So yeah, we're just here to speak about the taxi shortage of vehicles. We've talked to a lot of the drivers, as there aren't a lot of mobility dealers such as ourselves. So a lot of the drivers are getting worried about the age of their vehicles and having to replace them by March 2023, just due to the fact that the manufacturers of the vehicles themselves, they very, very limited production right now, as I'm sure most of you are aware. So I think extending the deadline is something that's going to be required.
Yeah.
It's just almost impossible to get, like, we're probably the largest mobility dealer of these type of vans. We have the backing of the Humberview Group, and we own multiple dealers, and we have a hard time getting vehicles ourselves to be able to accommodate both commercial and consumer use. And that we don't anticipate this getting any easier, you know, in the next year or so. It's just based on our talks with our dealers. They're saying it's going to be probably closer to 2 years before it gets anywhere back to what it used to be. And Ryan can help me with these numbers, but I think for Toyota for 2023, we've ordered
About 50.
We've ordered about 50 units, which of both is going to be for commercial and consumer, and we can't order anymore. Toyota's sold right out, so it's a very difficult time, and especially for these taxi drivers.
Yeah, and you have Ryan, so thank you again for your time. So to further Rob's point, it's a combination of everything with the COVID and the supply chain shortages. And where we're finding the most difficulty is getting the actual physical vehicle especially for the taxi cabs. Toyota, the Chryslers, they're just not producing to the same levels. So this combination with everything else is combined for the perfect storm with these vehicles and the taxi drivers in the city of Toronto, to where it's going to be quite difficult. We have a couple of ideas that we work with and are trying, but I would recommend highly to extend this, because we just don't know when we're going to get these vehicles or be able to get our hands on them. We are hearing as long as almost 2 years on the retail side of things. Granted, we have fleet, so it's all up in the air. And this is kind of what we're thinking. So I guess that's it. And we can leave you with this deck to kind of go over some of the things that we've come up with, just as it relates to this extending the contract there. And I don't know how this works after that, but I think that's all we really have to say. Is we would recommend that as well, because it's going to be quite difficult to get vehicles. And I think I'm done. What about you, Rob?
Yeah, no, that's just the main point, is just to let you know that it is very difficult. I mean, I wish we could get them. We'd all be happy, but unfortunately, that's just not reality right now.
Yeah. And then I think that's it for us.
Okay. All right. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank
Does
you.
anybody have any questions of the two deputies?
Questions, Mr. Chair.
Deputy Mayor Holliday.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the speakers for visiting us today. I do believe you mentioned you had some fairly extensive background in the automotive industry. So if council's going to allow the vehicles to last a little longer, stay in production a bit longer, what are the preventative maintenance steps that the owners need to take? And I'll just preface my question. I think, the two concepts were safety and environmental factors, I think, was some of the thinking behind requiring a more frequent changeover of vehicles. But if we're going to stretch them a little bit longer, what are the things that the owners need to do to make sure that they're running clean and efficiently and also safely?
Well, I think they're just going to have to continue maintaining their vehicles as they would if it was, 2 years old or whatnot. And again, that's not that we wouldn't love to be able to replace them for them. It's just right now it's not feasible. That's the thing. So they're going to have to obviously just keep running them. And I know most of them are pretty diligent with their servicing. Other than that, I really don't know. Do you have anything, Ryan?
No, I think basically with that, they're going to have to stay on top of their servicing, probably now more so than ever, because of these vehicles and the mileage that they get, or the kilometers they get on them per month. Working with organizations such as Humberview Mobility and others out there, and maybe coming up with a firm list of things that we think, and we have an idea of what they would need to be replaced on a regular basis when it comes to the conversion. But vehicle-wise, it's just being super diligent and staying on top of things, because it is going to be some time before we see the other side of this. So just being extremely diligent on the servicing, on the mechanical portion and on the conversion portion, because either of those factors can take these off the road, and just staying on top of it means super diligent. Maybe increasing the amount that they get it serviced would be the only thing that I could see, depending on the kilometers, obviously.
Right. So the kilometers will continue to accumulate. Any top components that come to mind? Because I'm just thinking our bylaw inspectors, will be out looking at different things, and I don't know, maybe they'll look at service records, but is it the tires, the suspension, the muffler system? What? And maybe maybe we need a mechanic on here for this, but are there critical things in year 7 to 10 that really need to be looked at, just to make sure that we've got safe vehicles out there?
Well, from my perspective, I think because they're automobiles, it does vary in terms of what can go on any particular vehicle at any given time, as we're aware that vehicles have different issues. But I think a more regular, maybe top to bottom vehicle check, where you check the suspension, you check the shocks, the tranny, the engine, and then in terms of the mobility components, checking the ramp, how they're operating in and out, and things like that. It's just, they're going to just have to be diligent on a full check and just double check to see how the vehicle's holding up. Best case scenario. And we will get vehicles in here and there, but I guess that's the best thing I can say, Rob.
Yeah, no, I think what you had mentioned is, unfortunately, we're not mechanics, so I wouldn't be able to tell you exactly what, but basically, yeah, the engine, the muffler system, obviously you don't want that leaking, and tires and brakes is really what they would need to stay up on top of.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Holliday. Other questioners from the committee? Seeing none. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next deputant is Andy Reedy. Reedy? Matthew's Andrew Reedy available?
Yes, we see him online. And here he is.
I did send in a written deputation, and rather than reading it to you, I'm just going to cut to the chase. I have been in the industry for almost 50 years. I've made deputations to City Hall for the last 30 years. I'm making this deputation on behalf of myself and every other owner. Now, I was dismayed, shocked, but not surprised that the recommendation from staff only refers to wheelchair vans. I was very carefully listening to the voice of the supplier. My question to all of you, if that problem consists or does come for vans, don't you think it also applies to sedans? At this stage, the fact that you did give a temporary extension is absolutely meaningless to the rest of us right now. I'm going to use myself as an example. I'll be 80 years old in 2 weeks. I was behind the wheel for well over 15 years. If I were to go back and drive my own car, my expense would be over $60,000 to get into a business that for the last 2 years gave me zero income. I would have to drive 6 days a week, 10 to 13 hours per day. Would any one of you do that at any age, let alone at age 80? So here is the bottom line. Why would you consider the wheelchair vans only and not the sedans? It is discriminatory, it is unfair and unjust. And from the looks of it, and for the last 10 years, the City of Toronto was hell-bent on leather to eradicate the taxi industry. I'll concede that the Wheel-Trans contract really is the only thing that keeps the taxi business going. By the way, you have sedans servicing the Wheel-Trans community as well. So how can you distinguish between a wheelchair contract for a wheelchair van versus a sedan? Please do not accept the report in its present format. Please include it for sedans as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reedy. Does anybody have any questions of the deputant? Seeing none, I will move to the next deputant, Mr. Baruz Kamsay from All Taxi Owners and Operators Limited.
And Mr. Chair, that speaker is within the room and approaching the microphone now.
Okay, thank you, Matthew. Mr. Kamsay, you have 5 minutes whenever you're ready.
And Mr. Chair, can you see the image that the speaker is presenting?
Good morning.
Yes, I can.
Thanks.
Can I go? All right. Good morning, member of the GGLC Council and all the people that are present and online. My name is Baruz Kamsay, and I represent all taxi owners and operators in the city of Toronto. First of all, I want to thank you very much for the previous extension that was given to the taxi industry. It was very necessary for us to continue. However, we are facing the same situation as the other people are facing, and that's the shortage of the vehicle. And if we wanted to change our vehicle right now, they are not available. So we are asking the city to give us this extension so we can get the vehicle. However, there is another thing that is happening, and that's the introduction of the all-electric taxi that was done by the A4U taxi back in the April. So the vehicle is on the road, is operating, and the response from the public was phenomenal. Everybody loved it. This vehicle is a zero emission. I don't see it anymore. Oh, right here. So this is a Hyundai Ioniq 5. You know, to get this vehicle, we had to wait for 1 year on a waiting list till we received it in the last February. Now, this is a 100% electric vehicle, zero emission, lots of room, beautiful car for a taxi, and it's been on since February. A lot of riders and a lot of good positive feedback from the riders in the city of Toronto. Now, since this vehicle has been introduced, there has been a lot of interest among the taxi owners and the operators in the city of Toronto. And I think as we have heard that the city of Toronto is talking about the electrification of the taxi and the other vehicles in the city. So we've been trying to reach out to members of the GGLC. I've already sent a letter, and we wanted to have a meeting to have a discussion about this, and perhaps maybe instead of 7 years for the vehicle, we are asking, you know, to increase that to 10 years, since this is a zero emission and it actually costs a lot of money. So here we are trying to ask the city to provide that extension so all the vehicles or all the owners that are interested to apply or to bring this vehicle to the road, so they have a time to go ahead and, you know, register themselves with the various companies that produce electric vehicle. And also, another thing that I want to add up over here is that there are a number of the fleets that the vehicle has been sitting for the last 2-3 years, and that's due to the lack of insurance, that they cannot come on the road. However, maybe, you know, sooner or later, you know, there's going to be some new insurance product available, but these cars haven't been moved for 2 years, 3 years, and their mileage is very little, and we are asking the council to consider to have this vehicle, you know, they can go for a recheck, you know, and any of this vehicle that passes all the proper safety in place, then they should be able, to continue to operate until such a time that the market comes back to its normality, so people they can change their vehicle. So again, I would like to ask the council, the GGLC committee, to ask the report to be back and reconsider to accept also to include the sedan for this 2 years or 1 year extension. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kamsay. Are there any questions of the deputant?
May I ask one, Mr. Chair?
Yep. Deputy Mayor Holliday, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Kempsey, for speaking to us. And forgive me if I missed it, but how many electric sedans or electric vehicles do you think are out there in use?
How many there are in the
in the taxi business in Toronto?
Right now, this particular one that you see the picture is the only one that we brought in, to check it out, to see how its performance is happening. And we are actually in a kind of a negotiation with Hyundai Canada to what they say, what kind of a lease you guys are, how many people are you guys looking to this? So first of all, there's a couple of things that we have to figure out. That's number one, is that what kind of incentive the city is going to provide to the taxi industry for us to bring these vehicles into the market. I mean, general vehicle, we keep it on the road for 7 years. Now, these cars are zero emission. There's no pollution involved with these cars. So can we extend that from 7 to 10 years to make it feasible for the owners to put this kind of cars on the road?
Okay, so it sounds like the electric vehicles are not on equal footing to the gas-powered ones.
I'm sorry?
It sounds like they're not on equal footing. It sounds like they're expensive. Is that true?
Well, they are not cheap, for sure. But the saving on the gas prices will help the owners tremendously to carry on with the payments of their cars.
Okay. And so your pitch to the committee is, because there's zero emission, maybe we should look at the length of time for those electric vehicles.
Sure.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Holliday. Other questions of the deputant? Seeing none, thank you very much, sir. Our next deputant is Peter Mandronis.
Thank you.
Matthew, is Mr. Mandronis available?
We see him online.
Okay.
We're just promoting him now. Peter, if you can hear me, you are unmuted and you can speak to the committee. Peter Mandronis, I think we see you now, but I don't think we hear you.
Hello?
There we are.
Okay, you can hear us now?
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry. Peter is here. He's asked me to speak on his behalf, if that's okay. My name is Kathy. I apologize for the sunglasses. I'm having a very difficult time with my eyes. And basically, we are also, thank you, first of all, for allowing us to speak. And after some confusion, the submission, I think, has finally reached you. So we appreciate your time and all the effort that you make on behalf of the taxi industry. Currently, our main concern is about the vehicle age and the extension to be included for sedans as well as the wheelchair accessible. We do know and we do appreciate that the city did extend the vehicle age for sedans up until the end of this year. However, given the fact that things have only opened up in the last few months, that 2-year extension has been unused for the most part, for the sedans. Given the fact that the vehicles have been sitting for, a good part of 2 years, there's been no wear and tear on them, etc. And, again, as much as we appreciate the previous extension for the vehicles, we just don't feel that it's been beneficial to us because we haven't been able to use them. Given the fact that most of everything opened up but March, April of this year. So we would ask that committee would consider amending the motion or the report to include the sedans as well as the wheelchair accessible. And we appreciate that you've added the wheelchair accessible, but we just are hoping that the sedans could be added as well.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there questions from the Committee of the Deputants? Seeing none, thank you very much for your deputation and for your father as well.
Thank you.
We will bring this into committee. Questions of staff on this item?
Yes. Councillor Matlow has a question.
Yep. Councillor Matlow, questions of staff?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have one very simple question, just doing our due diligence. I'm very sympathetic to everything that I've heard from the drivers. If we were to grant the extension, is there any, given the very real challenges that they presented to us, are there any significant safety concerns that you have, or does staff feel comfortable with moving forward with what they've requested?
So thank you for the question. Ours is specific to the vans, the accessible vehicles, because it's a smaller amount. So those have gone from 7 to 10 years. For the sedans, it's from 7 to 9. They are required each year to provide us with an annual safety certificate. So that is based on MTO requirements with a host of things that they check. So that would provide some assurances on safety, but it's ultimately up to council if you wish to grant it to the sedans as well.
No, I recognize that it's up to council, but based on your professional expertise, does staff feel comfortable supporting their request? Like, would you recommend that we do so or not, based on safety alone?
I would imagine with the reduction in kilometers, the reduction in use, and the safety certificate that it would be less risk to the city.
So do I infer that you think that you believe that it's reasonable, according to what you believe you need to determine that this is safe?
No, I believe it's a reasonable request.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Are there questions of staff on this item?
Questions of staff, Mr. Chair.
Deputy Mayor Holliday, go ahead.
Thank you. One of the earlier speakers mentioned that there was concern that only vans were being extended in the report before us, but I just read the word vehicle, and I guess, and I'm not familiar with it, but I guess there are sedans being used as accessible vehicles. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And so they would be exempted.
But this report is specific to wheelchairs.
Right.
There are, and so the vans are, there are other accessible vehicles that are not for wheelchairs.
Okay, so the report is specifically for wheelchairs, or it's all accessible vehicles?
It's all accessible vehicles.
Okay, so whether you have a van or a sedan, provided it meets the accessible criteria, it's being extended in the current report.
That's my understanding.
Okay.
Actually, no, I'm being corrected by staff. There is no such thing as an accessible sedan. While they are used for people who may have disabilities, such as crutches, difficult with mobility, but may not require a wheelchair. They take passengers. However, there is no such thing as an accessible sedan. There are only accessible vans. Pardon me.
Okay, so our code doesn't differentiate between sedan and van, but you're telling me practically a vehicle used in an accessible taxi cab, which is the words of the recommendation, are always vans.
That is correct.
Okay.
And the reason behind the van is we're talking about 600 vehicles, 370 of which, or 62%, are coming to end of life.
Right.
The difference with vehicles is with sedans, which have, and again, vans, there's only two options to get a van. With sedans, there are several options, and we're talking about up to 60,000 vehicles, all vehicle for hire, taxi and private transportation companies.
Okay, and so the two options are, there's only two manufacturers that provide a van that can be converted, is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. And you said something intriguing, Mr. Grant. You talked about, with less kilometers driven over the last couple of years, I presume because of COVID, there is a little bit of room to stretch the age. Would you say that the reductions in kilometers driven on the industry as a whole is commensurate with a year or 2 years or 3 years worth of driving? Can you give us some sense of what the two would equate to?
Through the chair, that's difficult to say. We do not look at kilometers. We look at age of vehicle as part of our regulations.
Okay. And how long would you say, just based on what you know about the industry, has there been a commensurate reduction in the kilometers driven? How many months would you say it played out through the pandemic?
Again, I don't have that exact data, but this industry has been significantly impacted since March of 2020. Again, coming out of it the last 4 to 6 months, so we are looking at 18 months.
About a year and a half. Okay, thank you. That's very helpful.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Holiday. Other questions of staff on this item? Seeing none, speakers on this item? No speakers? All right. Can I have somebody move the recommendations in the report?
So move, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Holiday is moving the recommendation in the report. All in favor? Oh, sorry, and I need a recorded vote. All in favor of the recommendation in the report?
On a recorded vote, Chair Ainsley, Councillor Matlow, Councillor Fillion, Deputy Mayor Holiday, Councillor Nunziata. Mr. Chair, that is 5 in favor, unanimous.
Okay, thank you, Matthew. Our next item is, sorry. Our next item is number 32, which has a registered speaker. GL 32.32, the 2021 Annual Human Rights Office Report. We have one registered speaker, Mr. Derek Moran.
And Mr. Chair, Derek is in the council chamber with us, just approaching the microphone.
Great. Mr. Moran, you're familiar with the process. You have welcome back to General Government Licensing. You have 5 minutes whenever you're ready.
Oh, and there's no Mr. My mom just called me Derek. I just want to say,
sorry, Derek.
I just want to
you
say,
have 5 minutes whenever you're ready. Sorry, it's been a while since I've seen you here.
I just want to say about me speaking at this meeting, this shall not be deemed to be in any way my consent expressed or implied, and doing so is fraud. God bless Her Majesty the Queen, and long live Her Majesty the Queen. And let the record show that I do not consent to the warrantless searches taking place downstairs here at Toronto City Hall. So in this report it says The city's COVID-19 mandatory vaccination policy was announced on August 19th, 2021, and required all city staff to disclose and provide proof of their vaccination status that they received 2 doses of the COVID-19 vaccine. Now, the part this place leaves out is that if you didn't get that shot, that you would get fired and lose your job, right? So based on that, I know that City Solicitor Wendy Wahlberg would love for every City of Toronto employee to demand to know on just who is surety for the corporation of the City of Toronto operating as John Tory's COVID-19 mandatory vaccination policy, because I recently made a complaint to the Auditor General about this mandatory vaccination policy. I emailed her, "Hi Beverly. Based on a tweet from this Twitter account, I have very good reasons to believe that the Toronto Public Library may have defrauded the public of $1.3 million in trying to find out who was counseling staff to demand to know who was surety for the COVID vaccine mandates the TPL issued to them. So 1, is it true that the Toronto Public Library spent $1.3 million trying to find out who was counseling staff to demand to know who was surety for the COVID vaccine mandates that TPL issued to them? And 2, is it true that it was Scott Duncan that was counseling staff to demand to know who was surety for the COVID vaccine mandates that TPL issued to them? Now, when Mayor Tory a while ago held a press conference outside announcing that he had lifted the state of emergency, part of what he said was people lost the choice as to whether they got vaccinated or not. But people never lost the choice as to whether they got vaccinated or not. But what we did say to people, and I think it was a very reasonable thing to say, is that certain privileges, certain activities that you might engage in, you may not be able to engage in if you choose not to get vaccinated, but it's your choice. So basically that's Mayor Tory, who's going around all the time reminding people that he's also a lawyer, rationalizing, coercing members of the public and City of Toronto employees into getting vaccinated. Because this is what the Supreme Court of Canada said in the Queen versus Beaver, Lamb, and Shearling Company 1960. There is no doubt that when an act is done under duress, under constraint, by injury, imprisonment, or by threats like, if you don't get this shot, we're going to fire you, it is invalid. Coercion and compulsion negative the exercise of a free will and vitiate a consent given under the fear that the threats will materialize. The parties then do not deal on equal terms. This is from Duplessis versus Canada, 2000, where the federal court said, in the standing court-martial of ex-Sergeant Kipling, whose breach of command resulted in severe disciplinary proceedings, the chief military judge found that the forced vaccination program did violate Section 7 of the Charter, and that the accused's right to life, liberty, and security of the person was infringed. Non-consensual vaccination under the threat of disciplinary proceedings amounts to an invasion of the bodily integrity and personal autonomy of a person. This is from Lapierre versus the Attorney General of Quebec, 1985, where the Supreme Court of Canada said they were talking on the state of the law, and they cite an article that was written in French. So this is the translation. The unavoidable risk of an accident resulting in death or serious injury, which is occasioned by a compulsory vaccination, has only been an undisputed scientific fact for a short time. And though very rare, this risk is still proportionately not widely known. Because if you really think about it, this is a mandatory vaccination policy here. With the mask bylaw, council actually passed a bylaw. It's not just a policy. So this is what Greater Vancouver Transportation Authority versus Canadian Federation of Students in 2009, the Supreme Court of Canada said, no matter how broadly the word law is defined for the purposes of Section 1, a policy that is administrative in nature does not fall within the definition because it is not intended to be a legal basis for government action. And in Homex Reality versus Wyoming, 1980, the Supreme Court of Canada said, it is trite law that a municipality may act only by bylaw and in any case only within its statutory jurisdiction. And that's my time.
Thank you, Derek. Appreciate your timeliness and watching the clock. Does anybody have any questions of the deputy? Seeing none, thank you very much, Derek. Questions of staff on this item?
Questions to staff, Mr. Chair. Stephen Holiday.
Deputy Mayor Holiday, go ahead.
Thank you. My questions are going to be similar for the next report, but the report, I guess, refers to a very large increase in the category called CREED. And I take it that has to do with the vaccine requirements in the workplace and also the COVID-19 pandemic in general. And so my question is it possible for staff in future iterations of the report to help articulate further the impacts, especially if they're temporary, with respect to COVID-19 on this? And the reason I ask that is there are other categories that saw, although numerically not large increases, compared to previous years, there were large increases. And it's hard for me as a counselor to tell if there's a trend happening, which is something else that we need to keep our eyes on. Sorry, it was a long question.
Speaker, I can take that on behalf of the People in Equity Group. We're happy to adjust the report in future to make clear that there may be certain trends that are associated with COVID-19, specifically, as you pointed out, the CREED issue being one, in particular for the human rights group that was heavily impacted by the mandatory vaccination policy.
Mr. Malloy, is there any other sections in here, or grounds, I guess would be the proper words, that council should draw its attention to that may also have been increased because of either COVID-19 or the vaccine requirements in the workplace?
For the Speaker, CREED is the one that I'm most familiar with, but I'll ask my colleague from the equity section to comment on whether there were any other trends related to COVID-19, the vaccination policy.
Good morning. Thanks for the question, Councillor. Through the chair, I would just mention and reinforce what Sean has said, that CREED is the area where there has been the most significant increase. There were some inquiries related to family status as well. I just want to, on the point of attributing some of these increases to COVID, I think it's important to mention that certainly COVID has a huge impact in terms of what we're seeing in this report, but there are a number of reasons for that related to also, I think, the general awareness or maybe increased awareness that folks may have had about the processes of the Human Rights Office, whether that stemmed from seeking information because of COVID-19 and the situation in general, but there are also a lot of measures that the HRO takes to raise awareness among the City of Toronto staff and otherwise about its services. But family status would be the other category that we could potentially attribute some of these increases to.
Okay, and I'll play out a couple of other ideas. We had masking policies in facilities that may have prompted inquiries or I guess cases within the office. And we also had situations where the delivery of city services changed. It became virtual, or the front counters were closed, or the lineups were different. I mean, it's been very complicated over the last couple of years. And so is it, again, I'll go back to the original question, is it possible to articulate these out a little further, and I'm not suggesting a motion, but to articulate them out a little bit further? And in particular, the reason I ask this is because we continue to transform our services digitally, and we continue to rethink how our workforce is distributed, either physically or in person, or in the case of some employees working from home while logged into the city system. And those are different environments. So can you help us along with that, with further and deeper study into this?
Yes, certainly. We can do our best to break down where those significant COVID impacts are and the different categories that exist. But as I mentioned, CREED, family status, and to some extent disability are the primary three. When it comes to masking, I do want to just share that from an internal perspective, from a staff perspective, although there's been a lot of discussion around masking, that wasn't a significant driver in terms of denial of service or access to service based on masking. That wasn't a significant driver of complaints.
Just to clarify, is that, I mean, because I think this includes inquiries from the public just with respect to our mask requirements in city facilities. Are you mentioning to me that that may not have been a significant jump? It was just good to know.
I'm speaking specifically about staff in that particular example.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So in other words, within staff in the city, there wasn't a significant uptick related to masking, but the question remains with respect to members of the public, with respect to masking, you can't offer comment, and that's okay. Just I want to be clear.
Yeah, we would have to go back and see what further analysis can be done, but we don't have that information.
Okay. So my wrap-up question, again, without going through a motion or anything like that, would staff agree that the next iteration of the report could include a little bit more depth, A, on trends emerging from COVID very broadly, and B, helpful information as we consider our HR policies, our physical location policies, and our digital policies with respect to delivery of services, and any trends that might help us inform us about the impact of those changes on the enterprise.
Yes, we can go back and do our best to flesh that further and provide some more clarity and distinction on COVID drivers specific to some of these high pressure categories.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Holliday. Other questions of staff on this item? Seeing none, speakers on this item? Seeing none, can I have somebody move the recommendation to receive the report? And I'd also like to thank the Acting Chief People Officer for all of her hard work and dedication.
Okay, I'll move receipt of the report.
Thank you, Speaker Nunziata is moving receipt of the report. All in favor? That carries. Our last item that we have deputants on is number 34, next steps for Casa Lomas north of Austin Terrace properties, creating a public vision for a public heritage site. We have one registered speaker, I believe. Sorry, we have two registered speakers. The first speaker is Mr. Nick Donato from Liberty Entertainment Group. Matthew's Mr. D. Donato. My apologies. Available?
Yes, sir.
Yes, I'm here.
Mr. D. Donato, you have 5 minutes to speak whenever you're ready.
Just trying to set up our presentation so it's available to all of you, and I do have a hard copy of the presentation. Should anybody?
Okay. Are you and Stacey Hawkins making a joint deputation, or?
No, I'm just. I will do the first part, and Stacey Hawkins will do the second part.
Okay, perfect.
Doesn't plug in. What, there into it? Sorry, we're trying to get that presentation up.
Yep, not a problem.
That's VGA. Okay, so let's go. Committee members, thanks so much for providing us the opportunity to depose on this matter. I, as a proponent of the RFP for the North Campus, would like to provide insight into Part 6, Item 35.2, Council Request for Proposal, and specifically the items themselves. The item that's in question is number 6 of the Exhibit 35.2, and it's the City Council request that the Casa Loma Corporation review options for the north portion of the Casa Loma complex, including consideration of issuance of a request for expression of interest, and in doing so, identify a vision and uses of the north portion of the Casa Loma complex, ensure the vision and uses proposed are complementary to the heritage, tourism, and event uses in the main house and grounds, preclude the sale of the city-owned lands, and provide that the review process includes significant community and stakeholder consultation. On these items, I would start with the first item, which is consider an expression of interest, but actually the city went as far as doing an RFP. Here is the RFP that we had submitted to the city, dated June 30th, 2015. It was quite a comprehensive RFP. Took a considerable amount of time and effort, both from the City of Toronto and the proponent to deliver this RFP. If you'd like a copy, we can make one available. The city and the Liberty Entertainment Group have been in negotiations with respect to this RFP because it is a significant component of what's happening at Casa Loma, and it's a considerable and significant attribute to the City of Toronto. So these negotiations are important, and the vision for the property is important. And if you review our RFP and some of the changes in terms of what that RFP was to where we are today, they have been made, those changes have been made over a 3 to 4 year discussion process with the City of Toronto Economic Development Committee and the Corporation of Casa Loma. We've also expended $100,000 on this negotiations process, and at this time to look at this and say it's not appropriate that it's complete is concerning. The delay in the process has been mainly due to the staffing issues at the City of Toronto, the changes in staffing, and most recently the issues of COVID in terms of trying to finalize this application or this RFP. One thing I do want to note is that we are currently operating under the existing lease for the North and South Campus. So all those items have been addressed in terms of rent, in terms of operations of the property, and this RFP process in terms of conclusion with us, it was not a priority to the city staff. I have expressed concerns to the city staff in terms of not completing the process, but I also want to say that I applaud the City of Toronto staff for the diligence they have executed with respect to this process. They took 3 years in terms of looking at what we were doing in the North Campus and changing RFP and components of RFP to ensure it respected the heritage components of Casa Loma and the historical nature of the property. I also applaud the city staff for their diligence in COVID and identifying this as not a priority, but getting through COVID with all the other properties and so on is a priority to the city and put us aside. I fully understand that, and I applaud them because I understand how difficult it was in the Economic Development Committee and the heritage sites, how difficult it was in the past 2 years to continually operate those things and the amount of work they've done. So I would never criticize the staff for not getting this thing done in the past 2 years, but applaud them for what they have been doing. So 6A and B is to identify vision and uses of the north portion of Casa Loma and ensure the vision is complementary to the heritage use and tourism of the main grounds. This has been done for the past 8 years. In the first 4 years of it, we worked very closely with Councillor Joe Mihevik, and we had worked very closely with Michael Williams of Economic Development and Culture to create the best vision for the property. Item C identifies to preclude the sale of the city-owned lands. The sale of the land has been precluded and was never even a consideration. This is a city property. I personally believe that the North and South Campus should be treated as one property because that's what it was initially in terms of heritage and history and should continue to be operated that way. It identifies D that the review process includes significant community and stakeholder consideration. Over the first 4 years of our operation of the North Campus and Casa Loma, we would have monthly meetings and then quarterly meetings, and the community was informed and involved by former Councillor Joe Mihevc on a quarterly and an annual basis as needed on all the operations of Casa Loma and all developments of Casa Loma. When Councillor Josh Matlow was elected as sole councillor for the Casa Loma area, he arranged one community meeting in January 2019 to discuss issues and concerns regarding Casa Loma. This meeting was held off-site at Spadina House. Only 5 constituents attended the meeting, 3 of which were very complimentary to the progress at Casa Loma to date. Councillor Matlow has declined over a dozen invitations to visit Casa Loma and view the work that has been achieved at the castle and view the North Campus. He has refused to tour the castle and review what we have done in terms of a heritage process. I'm pleased to have the opportunity at this time to present some of the things that we have done at Casa Loma over the past 8 years. The restoration efforts of the interior and exterior. We've installed stone driveway to the stables. The refurbishment of the entire second floor, which has never been accessible to anybody at the stables. The installation of a complete fire safety system to protect the city asset and visitors. The installation of heating and air conditioning to the main component areas of the North Campus. We've expended over $6 million in the North Campus to complete our vision in terms of moving forward and ensure that it's a heritage site that's maintained for the City of Toronto. As mentioned, you can see in the photo here, we've created original stone walkway to the stables, which was a dirt road before, tripping hazard, but now we've done it in the large size slate, which is extremely expensive, but complementary to the castle itself. We had a complete refurbishment of the entire second floor, which had never been used before. The second floor of the stables at Casa Loma were closed to the public for over 75 years, and we're in a dire need of considerable work and a restoration. What we wanted to do was create permanent heritage exhibits, which were complementary to the grounds of Casa Loma and to the heritage of the city. The stables itself was left as original stalls and were refurbished. We could not have horses as one of our original RFP items, but based on community consultation and city consultation, an equestrian area was not approved or did not appear to be one of the things that would warrant being at the castle. So as opposed to fighting that, we've stepped back from that, but have maintained the stables and their existing condition for viewing for the public. As part of the garage exhibit, what our intentions, and I applaud my team for the creativity in their efforts to express the history of Casa Loma. And in the garage, we express the history of Casa Loma through cars. This provides 2 distinct assets in terms of what we're doing. It allows us to showcase the castle, but also allows us to showcase what people want to see. So the 1910 Maxwells you see on the lower area, they were selected and purchased for Casa Loma exhibit, and these cars reflect the 1910 where the garage was actually built. 1922 Woody up there reflects a time when Sir Henry Pellet was losing the castle. The 1914 Model T Ford was the year that Henry Pellet moved into the castle. And the 1930 Model A is the year that the castle was turned into a hotel. So we showcase history of the castle, but engage people to read about that history through looking at the cars. The other permanent heritage exhibits are in the tunnel, the history of Toronto, the dark side. It's an extraordinary photo exhibit reflecting Toronto's most devastating parts of history and has been created for the tunnel. Images of the Great Fire, the Great Depression, the Great Plague. These are all things that people have interest in, and instead of walking through an empty tunnel, we allow them to engage in the history of the castle through the eyes, the history of Toronto through the eyes of the castle. We will be adding a new one, which is the COVID exhibit at the end of this term, reflecting the history of the castle and the dark side. One thing that we created was a celebrity museum, and this has been extremely well received. It's our newest exhibit. And what we found is that heritage continues to move forward, and that what is heritage and when is that defined? Well, in our mind, the Castelloma in film and Castelloma in celebrity is one of those heritage components of the castle which should be reflected to the community, one that is of great interest. So when you come through the Castelloma, on the second floor, which had never been used before, we have created an extraordinary exhibit with silicone figures that are lifelike but reflect the castle in its history of film and its celebrity. So there is a figurine of our Prime Minister Justin Trudeau reflecting his visit to the castle with the President of Mexico. The image of Drake reflecting his multiple video productions in the castle. And we have several others, and it's a really an incredible exhibit which has been well received, and we have X-Men has been shot at the castle. We have exhibit of that, the Tuxedo, and movies such as Chicago. This is part of the history of the castle, and this is how we've reflected it. We've also created seasonal productions, and the reason for those is that we need to engage Torontonians. It is a heritage site, but it is a heritage site which has to bring Torontonians to enjoy the castle itself. And in doing so, we've created this magical castle for winter with the Santa Claus exhibit in the stables. The tunnel gets turned into Santa's workshop, and this engages multiple families for the Christmas season. So we shift from our heritage-specific history of the castle to an engaging production which allows general Torontonians to come visit the castle year after year. We've created a production called Legends of Horror, and this is done through the Halloween season, reflecting the heritage, the history of movies and the Legends of Horror. But the castle is a perfect backdrop for some of this. It's one of the most engaging events we have, and actually it's gained international notoriety and made the castle an international historic site where people come from across the country and across North America to come visit the castle during Legends of Horror. They've actually had a competition where you can win a flight to Toronto from Vancouver, and it was a competition held in Vancouver for a couple of years now, and gets our word out in terms of what Castelloma is and what Toronto is, and engages the community outside to bring them to Toronto. We've created a seasonal production for children during March break, Imagine Dragons. Again, utilizing the backdrop of a wonderful castle, knowing that children like the dragon theme, but always educational in that we express medieval times and the culture of those periods to the children. So everything we do in terms of our productions has been family-oriented and geared towards education for children. The most recent production we completed was the Symphony by Candlelight in the stables. And this was done just after COVID in March of this year. The main reason for us actually executing this was to provide an opportunity for musicians to play who had been out of work for 2 years. Based on the number of seats, 150, and the cost of the production, this was not a production that would make us money, but one that would engage the community and engage musicians to have work. It was an incredibly successful event. It went from 4-week to an 8-week sold-out production. So we gave 8 weeks of steady work to musicians who were out of work for so many years, and gave Toronto something to come back to and engage in right after COVID. So this was one of those extraordinary productions that happened because of COVID, and we hope to continue doing that in the stables during the off-season in February and March.
Sorry, Mr. DiDonato, I need you to wrap up soon.
Okay. We have done a few other things in the castle itself, all experiential programs such as the escape games, but every time we've done any of those, the Station M reflects the history of Castelloma when Castelloma was a secret area where sonar technology was being investigated, and we immerse our game players into the history of Castelloma. And the other programs are the same. With respect to community consultation, every step of the way we have consulted with the community, identifying what's right and what's wrong, what works for the community. Obviously, sometimes when you have a successful commercial a property and a tourist attraction like Casaloma, there are issues with respect to traffic and noise, and we work very diligently and closely with our community to try to mitigate that, minimize that, and we would have monthly, as I said, or quarterly meetings in terms of determining what to do. Most recently, our thought during COVID was to install a Michelin-style restaurant in the stables. We had an area which was underutilized, would have been a 65-seat fine dining restaurant, which would elevate the level of the stables, but most importantly, the restaurant food was all coming from the gardens in the back of the stables. And this is a Michelin sort of direction. We were going to create incredible vegetable gardens. We've actually planted apple trees, so it was farm to table for this restaurant.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chair, a point of order. It's been almost 16 minutes according to the clock. Is this typical?
I will conclude. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. DiDonato. Questions of the deputant?
I do.
Councillor Matlow.
Nick, thank you for coming and making your presentation. I worry though that perhaps your presentation, well, I completely agree that Liberty and you have done tremendous work on Casaloma. Doesn't speak to the motion in front of us itself. So I just want to ask you a couple of questions regarding it. Can you please cite, if you're able to, when, as council directed, when staff brought a report prior to issuing the RFP to City Council?
The staff has been working with us and diligently in terms of an RFP, would receive those proposals, and once receiving those proposals, will go to City Council to identify the direction and finalizing the proposal.
I'm talking about many years ago, when council directed staff prior to issuing the RFP, which you answered. When did they report back to council? Because that's a core part of what my motion addresses.
Well, I think we are in that process right now, and as I said, and I have stated, it has taken a considerable amount of time based on the staff's due diligence in ensuring that what they would propose to City Council would in fact keep with the direction of where the castle should be in terms of heritage and history and tourism.
Nick,
So,
I'm sorry, I don't mean to repeat myself. It's just that well, I'm not going to repeat myself. I'm not hearing that you know whether or not the staff actually brought a report to council before issuing the RFP. You're speaking about now, which is July 4th of 2022. That does not address what council directed staff to do. With respect to...
I would say, if I may answer that, your report, item 6, identifies that the staff should be doing an RFP and an expression of interest, which is what they did.
That's my point already. So with respect to the significant community and stakeholder consultation, can you speak to what significant community and stakeholder consultation occurred prior to issuing the RFP?
As I mentioned in my presentation, we were having monthly meetings for over 4 years with Councillor Mihevik, and he can attest to that. And I'm sure there are the records of those meetings with community at the castle, and we must have had 22 to 25 meetings with city staff and community reviewing the RFP and what we are doing at the castle.
Reviewing the RFP?
Reviewing the
Are you sure?
We're reviewing components of the RFP.
Could you let the deputant finish his answer, please?
Okay. I'm just going to make a note of that, Nick. So they reviewed the RFP during these monthly meetings with the community.
Councillor Matlow, if I can give you some very specifics, we did want an equestrian training camp for the young people. The community felt that horses and stables were not appropriate for the area. So those were part of our discussions, and it's one of the things that was not put into our RFP that we continued moving forward with. In our RFP, we also identified we would be doing an athletic club and gym in the property, and with those, the city staff and community felt not appropriate as a tourist attraction to have that private sector revenue generating component in the North Campus, and we walked away from that as well.
And this was with you, though, specifically, not an open RFP.
We had an RFP. They were reviewing the components of that RFP. and negotiating, finalizing the RFP. And while we were doing that, Councillor Matlow, the city identified things within our RFP which they felt were not appropriate. And we as an organization met with the community, reviewed those items, and removed them from our RFP.
Okay, interesting. So
well, Councillor Matlow, sorry to interrupt, but Councillor Mihevik is now back on City Council, who you know very well. Perhaps you can have those discussions.
I'm aware of that, Nick. But
and Councillor Matlow, you've never had this discussion with me before, and we have many meetings. I'm not sure why it has to be done in a public forum when I've invited you to City Hall, or I've invited you to the Castle numerous times and refused to even visit.
Let me ask.
Sorry, Councillor Matlow, could you let the deputy finish his answers,
allow me, Mr. Chair, if I may, to ask you about that. Is it not true that I have visited the council on public occasions, and I've even walked with you through it? However, the invitation that you asked of me was to have a private one-on-one dinner at your steakhouse, which I told you I found inappropriate, and I was happy to meet you for a coffee where both of us would pay our own check.
Councillor Matlow, you attended one meeting, which you were invited by the Kiwanis Club for the 100th anniversary, and you attended that one. I was very pleased that you came, and I was able to show you some of the components of Castleholm and the work we have done. Were you refused every other? May I finish? You've refused every other.
Sorry, Councillor Matlow.
Private dinner.
You've refused. You've refused every other.
This is your third warning. Like.
You've refused every other invitation.
The process is you ask the deputy a question, the deputy answers. If you could give him the courtesy of finishing his answers. Thank you.
You've refused every single invitation I provided to you to showcase what we are doing at the castle, where we wanted to do things, including the restaurant application. And you have a concern about the North Campus and what we are doing there, but you refuse to come and visit the North Campus.
So thank you. I'll just reiterate that question. Is it not true that your request to meet with me was in the context of whether you wanted to walk with me or not, to have a one-on-one private dinner at your steakhouse, which I told you I found inappropriate and that I'd prefer to meet with you as I did over a coffee at a coffee shop where we would pay our own checks?
Okay, I take exception to that comment, Councillor Matlow, because I invited you to the castle, and there is a restaurant at the castle, and my invitation was for you to see what we have done at the castle, including the North Campus. And at that point, we could have dinner should you so desire. And when you identified you did not want to have dinner, I said, will you come and visit the castle so I can show you around? And you refused to come and wanted to have a meeting outside of the castle in a coffee shop. I'm not sure how we can have discussions on how well and what we are doing at Castleholm on the North Campus without you even coming to visit us at the castle.
Thank you, Nick.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Matlow. Other questions of the deputy?
I have a question. I believe Councillor Holiday has a question.
Okay. Thank you, Speaker Nunziata. Questions of the deputy?
Okay, I'll go first. So, Nick, I remember when all this started with Castleholm, actually, when David Miller was mayor. So I know that when Councillor Mihevik was the councillor, that you did have monthly and quarterly meetings, correct?
Correct.
And Councillor Mihevik was part of that, and actually at that point, if I remember correctly, reported back to council on all the meetings that were being held and the updates.
That is correct, and with Councillor Mihevik meeting was Mike Williams was involved, as was Councillor Michael Thompson in economic development in terms of the direction of the castle.
Yes, so Councillor Thompson and Mike Williams as well. So you know, you just had a debate with Councillor Matlow on the number of times you've invited him. So I'm curious, do you have it on record, the number of times you've invited him and he refused to come?
I'm sure if I look through my records, there will be several invitations that have been extended for various community events and various significant, important events. Most recently, and the latest one is We at Casa Loma felt that it was important to support the Ukraine community, and we had a Ukrainian day where all the proceeds from Casa Loma would go to the Ukrainian community, and we gave up all our proceeds for the day. It was $36,000 that went directly to them.
Mr. Chair, point of privilege, if I may.
And Councillor Matlow refused to attend.
Now, you've also
Point of
mentioned in your
privilege, Mr. Chair, if
presentation.
I may just have a moment. Mr. Chair, I'm sorry, I can't hear you. You're on mute.
Councillor Matlow?
Would you please rule on, the line of these questions seem to be like a referendum on whether or not I'm accepting invitations to community events at Casa Loma. I don't know if this meeting is a referendum on whether or not my calendar can accommodate whether or not I can go to one community event or another at different places. This seems to be, you know what this is.
Well, okay.
No, I don't, Councillor Matlow, because
Councillor
you were asking
Matlow,
the deputant the same question.
Yeah,
So
you
thank
asked the
for your
deputant
point
the
of
same
privilege.
question, so I'm just elaborating.
about-
So
No,
Councillor
no,
Matlow,
no,
please,
no,
please
no,
allow
Francis.
me to ask my questions. Thank you. Thank
The
you.
deputant raised the question
Councillor
about whether or
Matlow,
not
Speaker
I
Nunziata
would
has the
meet with
floor.
I
him
have the
and
floor,
to
Councillor Matlow. So,
The Speaker has the floor.
to the deputant, in your presentation, you mentioned that you've spent over $6 million to date on improvements to the North Campus, correct?
That's correct.
Right. So when it in the past couple of years, because of the pandemic, and as Mike Williams retired, so basically the reason that we haven't really moved forward is because of the pandemic, and that there was it was very difficult for the staff to bring forward any of these reports, because a lot of the reports that were coming to council were delayed because of the pandemic and with all the restrictions and that we have. Is that correct?
If I may respond with respect to the timeline, the first 4 years was negotiations from our RFP and what we had presented to the city, and trying to create the right vision for the city and identifying items on our RFP which the city would not support and would need to be removed. And those specifically would be the equestrian component and the gym facility and social activities facility. That took some time because a couple of those were revenue generating items which we had to remove from our proposal, but we felt that the city was correct in those and had to recreate some of the visions. So we did that, and that took about 4 years in terms of negotiating. And then Mike Williams, who was the main negotiator, retired. Cheryl Blackman has taken that position, so she's not aware of all of the discussions we've had. And then we've had COVID for the past 2.5 years. And with all due respect, I think Cheryl Blackman has done an incredible job with what she has on her plate, because I understand, hospitality and the tourism industry and how devastating it has been. So I don't fault her for that, because it was in my interest to have this completed, but she had other items of priority that had to be done.
Right, and we understand that. So I'm sure that with all the negotiations and the discussions that you did have with Councillor Thompson and as well as Mike Williams, because Mike Williams was very involved with Casa Loma, if I remember, for many years, I'm sure that Cheryl will be able to go back and check the records and continue from the discussions that were held.
Yes, I'm sure they will have the records of all the discussions and the meetings with respect to the negotiations of combining the North and South Campus into one lease. And I'm sure there's records of both Mike Williams and Cheryl walking through the castle, reviewing any of our discussions and proposals to make sure that they were in line with what the city direction is for the castle.
Okay, just my last question. With the monthly meetings and quarterly meetings that were held with the community and with Councillor Mihevik, so all the meetings that were held, the monthly meetings, were held at Casa Loma with Councillor Mihevik and city staff?
Yes, correct. The meetings were conducted by Councillor Mihevik at the time, so he can reach out to all constituents through his riding. He held them at Casa Loma because he felt it was very important for them to visit the castle. And then as we were discussing castle issues, we can actually be at the castle to even walk through should we need to.
Okay, thank you. That's it for my questions.
Thank you.
Thank you, Speaker Nunziata. Deputy Mayor Holliday, questions of the Deputy?
Mr. Chair, thank you. Thank you for speaking to us today. Could you tell me a little bit more about the North Campus and how it works together with the South Campus or the main building? I think, and I'll just, because I think you made the comment that in your presentation that you thought that they should have always been one.
Yes, I honestly believe from the onset that the North and South Campus should be one. Why? Because from a heritage perspective and the things that the city wants Castleloma to be, it is imperative that the castle is seen as a castle. The North Campus was the first component that were built by Henry Pellet, the stables, his home on the North Campus, and then a tunnel connecting it to the South Campus. So one without the other does not represent the complete picture of Castleloma. I know it was separated at the initial request of Councillor Matlow because there was a concept perhaps doing a Toronto museum in the North Campus. The people doing the museum did not want to bid on the North Campus and felt that it was not appropriate, and that is why we were the sole proponents at the time. But I honestly believe it would be a disservice to Heritage, Castleloma, and the City of Toronto if you separate the two components and try to divide them as opposed to bring them together and showcase the castle's heritage and as a tourist attraction using all the facility. So
I may ask staff this, but in your view, how did the two pieces get broken apart? Was that always the plan? Because there's staff reports that go back to like 2013 on this, or even before that, I think. Was it originally two different packages, or did it break apart somewhere in the process?
May I respond?
Yes, that was the question for you.
Oh, that was, yeah,
in your view, in your experience on this.
Well, the original proposal was to do an RFP for Castleloma, the entire property. I think it was a motion by Councillor Matlow at the time to separate the two properties. So to move forward with the proposal, because the city was operating the facility and losing money at it, they did want to move forward. So they moved forward with it, adding item 6, which is the one we are deciding now, into the RFP.
So the item 6 says the Castleloma Corporation do a bunch of things, including an REI. But then I'm looking at the document in front of me. It says in 2015, there was an RFP for the North Austin Terrace in April 2015. So what did you respond to in 2015, an RFP or an RFI?
With my recollection, the original RFI would have cost an additional sum of money for the City of Toronto. At the time, Mike Williams decided to move right into an RFP to avoid having this process go through a double process. And so the RFI was not done, but they went directly to RFP because they wanted to see who would come out as proponent. So
you responded to an RFP. The wording in front of me on the council agenda says it was accepted. Did you get accepted as an RFP proponent at some point in time?
Yes, we did, but we have not finalized that through City Council based on the negotiations we had. And again, I believe the city and Mike Williams did a tremendous job in terms of identifying RFP and saying, you are the sole proponent. We could just hand this to you, but your proposal isn't exactly what we want. So he negotiated with us for 4 years and eliminated several revenue generating components to the effect of having a better presence for the City of Toronto so that the stables remained open to the public throughout and not a private health club, for example. So, I applaud because I look back now and saying, in RFP, perhaps, yes, that was the correct vision. The city did have a correct vision in identifying that it shouldn't be a private members club in the castle. It should be open to everybody, and it should be a tourist attraction. So we have made those changes based on that.
I understand. And so I'm going to ask two things because I got like 30 seconds here. If you could just ask you to comment. The first is, can you confirm to me that you are still under a lease or an agreement with the city? I think it predates this RFP. I thought I saw it in the staff report that you have some agreement when you took the South Campus to also have an agreement about the North Campus. And if you can just tell me a little bit more about the kind of events that go on in the North Campus and whether or not that's covered by the agreement and staff sign off on that.
We are currently under a lease for the South Campus, which includes the temporary lease of the North Campus, precluding the RFP and having another occupant. So we do have an operating agreement which identifies what we can and can't do in the North Campus. And quite frankly, we can continue on through the term of the lease without even finalizing this RFP, because the city does have a lease with us, just providing them the opportunity to do the RFP in North Campus. Everything we do at the North Campus is allowed and permitted, and everything we do at the North Campus has been discussed with not only the Casa Loma Board, but with the Economic Development Committee and with our local councillor.
Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Holliday. Other questions of the deputy on this item? Seeing none, Mr. DiDonato, when I guess this talks about the North Campus and the South Campus. I've been on the grounds many times with my kids. Would you say that for the average visitor that comes onto the grounds, they wouldn't really see a separation of the North and South Campus? To them, it's just Casa Loma?
I would answer unequivocally yes, and I think it would be a disservice to separate them and do something different with them, because it's very difficult to tell the history of Casa Loma without integrating the North Campus and the stables, which were where Sir Henry Pellet brought in the first cars to the city, and where he hosted the Queen's Own Rifles and his famous stables. It was a favorite part of the home, and he created a tunnel so we can get there through the winter time. And to separate that from the Casa Loma proper would be a complete disservice to the facility and the heritage of the site.
Okay. And when we talk about Casa Loma's history, I'm a history buff, and I understand the heritage of it and the long history and what Henry Pellet was trying to achieve. And you said that you had a number of community meetings, I guess going back to 2015, where things were not approved by the community. You mentioned, I think, a healthcare club in the stables and a number of other entities that the community decided they didn't want on the grounds. Was that my understanding correctly?
Yes, that is correct. The equestrian component was quickly objected to by residents in terms of the horses being there and on site, so we removed that. The health club component being a private area where people now were no longer being able to come through the second floor and to visit the castle as part of their Casa Loma tour experience was objected to, and we've removed that. And most recently, we felt that a restaurant in the potting shed area would be another great asset for the city, engaging more people to come and see the interior, open to the public and seeing the interior. But we had very few residents, mostly the ones adjacent to the castle, objecting to it. And we moved on because we're not here to fight with the community or with the Councillor Matlow or the City of Toronto. We're here to work with you and ensure that Casa Loma has become a world-class tourist site.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. I think that is the end of the questions for the deputant. We'll now move on to questions of staff. Does anybody have questions of staff? Councillor Matlow?
And I have a question as well.
Okay. Thank you, Speaker Nunziata. Got my list going.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So I just, it either doesn't exist or I'm unable to find it. So if I can ask staff, could they say definitively where can we find the report that was directed by council in 2013 for it to be done prior to the issuance of an RFP to City Council? Where is this report?
Through the chair, good morning to the committee. It's Cheryl Blackman from Economic Development and Culture speaking. In July 2016, there was a report at 2015 AGM Corporation Annual Report that noted that the North Campus RFP had one submission and that negotiations were paused. And throughout the duration from 2015 through 2018, in each report, there was a reference to the North Campus, and each of those reports was accepted on consent.
Mr. Chair, I appreciate that there are, passing references and notes. That's not what I'm asking about. So I'm going to say it again. Could staff please let us know whether or not there was a report as directed by City Council for City Council on this specific issue before issuing the RFP for Council to consider, not various notes and things in other documents.
Through this to the chair, to the question, Deputy Councillor Matlow, there is a indication of reporting back in the June 2015 report, the July 2016 report, the July 2017 report, the June 2018 report, the September 2020 report. In each of those annual reports, which are provided to and accepted by Council on consent, there was reference to the North Campus negotiations and to the RFP, and those were accepted on consent.
Mr. Chair, perhaps I wasn't clear enough.
Councillor Matlow, you asked the same question twice, and
I
the
haven't received an
acting
answer, though.
general manager gave you an answer.
So
if you can move on to another question, please.
So then to be clear, the answer is that there are references, including a note in a Casa Loma Corporation AGM report, that councillors would have been expected to review that, and that would have been what could have or should have prompted council to consider a vision for the North Campus. Is that the suggestion? Because I don't understand the answer.
Through the chair, the answer is, Councillor Matlow, that there were annual reports submitted by the then General Manager of Economic Development and Culture and the Chair of the Casa Loma Corporation, indicating the direction that the Casa Loma Corporation was taking. In each of those reports, there is, that I articulated earlier, there is a reference to a North Campus RFP. There is a reference to a North Campus report back, and those are indicated in each of those reports. I can certainly also speak to you about the consultations that are intimated as a result of those report backs, but that's what's in the reports that are available online and public to us.
So there's definitely, I mean, okay, so I'm not, so to be clear, I'm not hearing that there was in fact a report, and this is what my motion is about, right? Like, just to be clear, like there was not a report to council as directed by council prior to issuing the RFP, aside from what you're referencing, which is certain referencing to notes in AGM reports, etc. Another councillor, or Mr. Donato, referenced Councillor Mahavic's meetings with residents, which often would also veer towards this traffic and other issues in the community. Is that material, like, did council ever ask the local councillor to report to City Council, or is that something that is a responsibility of city staff?
To the chair, to be clear, Councillor Matlow, what I'm saying to you is that the report back did happen in the dates that were indicated through the annual report. I'm also able to tell you that there were 58 pages of reporting indicating that there were consultations held on the future options for Casa Loma, May the 10th, 2012, November the 26th, 2012, November 28th, 2012. And in each of those meetings, Councillor Mahavic and yourself attended those meetings with Mike Williams and consultants and public to talk about future directions. And this included conversations about the future of the North Campus.
I was asking about the meetings that those.
Thank you, Councillor Matlow. Last question.
I was asking about those meetings that another councillor was posed to sort of ask certain questions around monthly meetings, and the dates that you mentioned. I don't understand, what do they have to do with the the directions of the 2013 motion itself at council. Like, I don't see how those are material to what was actually requested. So what were those significant stakeholder and community consultation done by staff prior to issuing the RFP, and therefore, and then the actual specific report that was meant to go to council? I'm hearing like various other things, but not what council actually asked city staff to do.
The chair, thank you for your question, Councillor Matlow. The 58 pages of consultation reports that I've been able to take out of the archives indicate that on May the 10th, 2012, the future options for Casa Loma public meeting was held, and it was held with HLT Advisory, Philip Goldsmith Architect, and CBRE, and there were public attendees, including yourself and Councillor Mihevc, and where you indicated in the minutes having done a welcome. Those meetings were to talk about the future directions of Casa Loma, and there was everything from the conversations about the day-to-day operations and analysis to the way that they would consider zoning, right through to interests of third parties and other interests for the opportunities for real estate and development opportunities in the area. The November 26th meeting, which it was with yourself.
I'm sorry. What year? I'm so sorry. I forgot what the motion.
Mr. Chair, can you ask Councillor Matlow to stop interrupting staff while they're answering the question?
Staff referring to a 2012 meeting.
Councillor Matlow, let the staff finish their answer.
What year?
Councillor Matlow, the meeting that I'm referring to in the second meeting is November 26, 2012. And that meeting was also with yourself and Councillor Mihevc, and it included conversations about the North Terrace there, the North Campus as well in that meeting. And then the public consultation was also held on November 28th, 2012. Again, there was conversations about the North Campus in that meeting. There was also a meeting on February 26, 2015 that included yourself and Councillor Mihevc, which was updates for the public seeking feedback on the process to determine the future use and tenant for Casa Loma's North Precinct, Casa Loma Corporation, and it was also with the idea of being fair and transparent. So there were consultations that did happen, and those were summarized in the reports made to council that were accepted on consent through the reports that were submitted by former GM Mike Williams for the dates that I provided earlier.
Mr. Chair,
thank you,
I
Councillor
apologize for doing this. Point of privilege. Just the answers that I received, like everything you heard there, though, wasn't actually. The council resolution was in 2013. We heard about meetings in 2012. An update by councillors has nothing to do with city staff's responsibility to do council's.
Sorry, Councillor, do you have a point of privilege?
Well, my point of privilege is that I didn't actually receive any answers to the questions that I had my 5 minutes for. Like
Councillor Matlow, you did receive answers. A good chunk of your first 5 minutes, you asked the same question 3 different ways, and you received an answer for all 3 of them. So thank you very much. Other questions of staff at this time?
Yes, I have a question.
Speaker Nunziata, questions of staff?
Yeah, thank you, and to Cheryl. So if I recall, because it was going back a few years, so the committee that we have at Casa Loma, which involves city staff and the local councillor, that was formed by city council, correct?
Through the chair, Speaker, that's correct.
Right, I remember that going back a few years when this all started, actually, when David Miller was the mayor. So moving ahead, to Cheryl, would it not be appropriate that staff complete the agreement with Austin Terrace, the north site, as soon as possible, and so we can move forward and complete it? Because I know with the pandemic and that we haven't been able to do that, but I think that moving forward that we should do that and continue to work with the community as well.
Through the chair, and yes, Speaker Nunziata, that is absolutely the intention of staff, to continue to advance those dialogues that were started by former General Manager Mike Williams. It is our intention to work very closely with Mr. DiDonato at Liberty Entertainment Group and our colleagues in the corporate real estate team to be able to advance those negotiations and finalize that work.
Okay, and it was delayed because of the restrictions and that, and I understand that. And Cheryl, as you know, Mike Williams was amazing when he was at the city. He did so many projects, and with the restrictions, that there are a lot of work that we haven't been able to do because of the pandemic. And I just want to thank you for the excellent work that you're doing. But as far as all these minutes that you responded to and all these meetings that were held, you have all those, all the minutes, and you have all the documentation on the date and time and the minutes on those meetings, correct? So if necessary, if Councillor Matlow wants a copy of it, because he doesn't seem to believe anything that staff are saying, that you can provide that, correct?
Through the chair, Speaker Nunziata, we do have the minutes. We've been able to pull those from the archives, and they are available. And certainly, the meeting that I mentioned in February 26, 2015 did happen with consultation, and it did include Councillor Matlow and Councillor Mihevik, as well as was facilitated by a third-party facilitator. So those notes are available and can be shared, as I indicated, to his chief of staff.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Those are my questions, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair, questions?
Thank you. Sorry, Deputy Mayor Holliday, questions of staff?
Pardon me for interrupting you, Mr. Chair. I do have questions of staff. Ms. Blackman, I'm going to read just an excerpt from the annual report from the Casa Loma Corporation, May 26th, 2021. So this was brought before council. And it's near the end. When the terms of the lease agreement for the main campus of Casa Loma were approved by City Council in November 2013, the board also directed staff to assess alternatives for the future of the north campus of Casa Loma. Appropriate uses were identified with public consultation, and then an RFP process was subsequently undertaken and LEG was selected. And I think LEG stands for Liberty Entertainment Group. And then the next paragraph says, negotiations related to the North Campus are still ongoing, as will be the rent arrangements for 2020. Now, may I understand correctly, or do I understand correctly, that's a similar language to the previous year's reports, but this is the piece that tells council what the situation is right now with the tenant and the RFP. And this is the way that it comes before us to council in the annual report. Do I understand that correctly?
Through the chair, Deputy Mayor, you understand this correctly, yes.
So the group is the Casa Loma Corporation, and that it's signed here. You're the chair, and there's Joanne Pinn, Andrew Flynn, Don Boyle, and Josie Scioli. That's the corporation, right?
Through the chair, that's correct.
And so the RFP and the leases, that's with the corporation. Is that correct? The rental agreements, I guess?
Through the chair, you are correct.
Okay. So do I understand correctly, an RFP was issued, there's a respondent, and there's a process ongoing right now with negotiations?
Through the chair, you are correct.
So if there's a question about public consultations leading into that RFP, does that have a bearing on what you're doing today? Because you've issued an RFP and you're negotiating it.
Through the chair, Deputy Mayor, I believe that all these conversations have a bearing on the negotiations, but I would defer also to the colleagues in CREM who are supporting the team in EDC with those negotiations as part of our work relationship updates.
So you got ahead to my next question, but that was, it seems to me from the questions and answers today, there's an ongoing iterative process with the local residents, a local councillor, and anyone that's interested in the business relationship between the Casa Loma Corporation and the proponent. So regardless of the discussion today, do people have an avenue to bring feedback back to the decision makers? And the decision makers, I think, is the Casa Loma Corporation and the proponent, or the leasee, I guess, or lessor, I forget the terms right. But you've got a tenant, basically, and you've got the ownership. Is that the avenue to bring this information?
Through the chair, Deputy Mayor, absolutely, the residents do have an avenue to be able to bring feedback. And with the pandemic, we have been able to meet with Councillor Matlow and Nick DiDonato at Liberty Entertainment Group with residents to speak about ideas and concerns. So there is an avenue, and we certainly do also have this, desire, as it indicated in the lease, to also have an annual forum to be able to share ideas about what's happening with Casa Loma Corporation. And as Nick DiDonato indicated, the pandemic did waylay his ability to meet more frequently during the pandemic, and we have to really commend Mr. DiDonato and his team for being able to really be resilient during this pandemic, because the tourism industry, as we know, was devastated.
Ms. Blackman, without going into a closed session with legal, because I guess I could have a bunch of questions about RFP and contract and all that, what you could tell us in public, I guess, what is staff's recommendation with respect to the negotiations that are ongoing? Because that's the item here. I mean, what do you recommend to the committee? Councillor Matlow's asked a bunch of questions, but what should the committee do next? You've got to manage this relationship between the Casa Loma Corporation and the tenant. Do you have some advice for us about where that's headed, or what we could, or do we need to do anything, or is this work coming to a resolution?
Through the chair, thank you for your question, Deputy Mayor. My recommendation to this committee would be to allow staff the opportunity to advance the work that we committed to doing with Mr. DiDonato and the Casa Loma Corporation. Certainly always wanting to be able to have conversation with Councillor Matlow and community, as we've indicated through the meetings we've had to date. I think that we're at the point where we could get this lease completed in 2022, and that we have to accept the work that has been done, a great deal of it from the looks of all of the historic paperwork, on communicating with community, on forming and accepting feedback around the future uses and the vision for Casa Loma, and also respecting the fact that an RFP was conducted and a proponent was awarded.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right. Thank you, Deputy Mayor Holliday. Other questions of staff on this item? Seeing none, speakers on this item? Councillor Matlow.
So I came across the fact that Liberty Entertainment was moving ahead with preparations for a Michelin level restaurant at the stables. When I received correspondence from residents about what was occurring last Christmas, that was a surprise to them and a surprise to me. And they were, connecting with me less to complain, but more just what's going on. Like, we've received no notice. We don't know what they're doing, but it looks like they're putting together a restaurant with a bathroom and a kitchen, etc. So I explored what was going on, and I reached out to Cheryl Blackman and Joanne Pym and their team. And we then proceeded to have meetings with residents and Mr. DiDonato. I've always had, I believe, a very respectful relationship with Mr. DiDonato, who I respect very much. And you'll see even in the letter related to my motion, I've acknowledged that the work that Liberty has done on Casa Loma is wonderful. They've done some tremendous work on revitalizing it. That being said, though, when I did receive, and I note this only because it's in his presentation, I wouldn't have gone there myself, but to suggest that I simply refuse to take a tour of Casa Loma with Mr. DiDonato is just not true. I've been there for public events. Some I've been able to attend. Some due to scheduling purposes, I have not been able to attend. But I was very clear that the invitation, which included a dinner at the steakhouse, was not, in my view, appropriate. I know that Mr. DiDonato has hosted other city councillors in that way before, and for my comfort level, I don't think it's not something I want to do. But I did immediately say, rather than meet at the casa and have dinner at your restaurant, let's meet at a coffee shop. We both we can have a good coffee, and we did, and we had I thought a very productive conversation. So, but regardless of the fact that Ms. Blackman in response to my questions cited 2012 meetings that have nothing to do with this, because the resolution to council was in 2013. Despite the fact that she and others cited Councillor Mihevc, being a good councillor and meeting with people monthly, that has nothing to do with staff's responsibility to conduct consultation in the way that, council didn't direct Councillor Mihevc, right? It was about city staff. And it wasn't Councillor Mihevc's responsibility to write a report and submit it to council. I think it's absurd, frankly, to reference notes in AGM reports as somehow in any way fulfilling council's direction to city staff. That's not what council asked for. It is not reasonable. I don't think any of you, correct me if I'm wrong, but I can't imagine any of you.
Sorry, excuse me, Councillor Matlow. Sorry to interrupt. If you could retract the comment about staff's comment being absurd, please. They don't have any platform or forum to defend that comment. You asked, in my opinion, as the chair, you asked a question, they answered it. So if you could please retract the comment about their answer being absurd. Thank you.
But I think it is absurd to expect.
Councillor.
It is nonsensical. It is not realistic. It is not.
So you won't, if you're not retracting?
I'm trying to find a better word that relays what I'm trying to express. If you could help me.
So are you retracting or not retracting?
Sure, I will retract it, and I will say that it is unreasonable to expect that councillors either would have read those AGM reports to the detail of seeing those references or memos or notes in them. Moreover, it doesn't actually adhere to council's resolution that there be a report to council before issuing the RFP. So the motion itself, like if you get rid of the noise about whether or not Nick and Liberty Entertainment have done a good job or not, I think they've done a very good job. If you get rid of the noise about whether councillors had meetings or not, we've all had meetings with residents. I've had several meetings with residents too. That's our job. If you're not that worried about whether or not councillors have had steak dinners with Liberty Entertainment or not, that's noise too. Then, if you look at the motion itself, it is. I think I have seen no evidence, nor was it produced today, that council's resolution in 2013 was actually adhered to. There was never a vision created with extensive or significant consultation with the public and the community. And there was never a report produced and submitted to council for our consideration about a public building with such historical importance that should have a historical and public purpose. The question of whether or not it should be a private Michelin restaurant was not something that council had a chance to consider. So I ask you to support my motion to simply correct the error in staff's implementation of council's direction and ensure that it be done properly so that confidence can be had by the community and the public as to where we go from here. If it's council's resolution ultimately that a Michelin restaurant should be there, that's up to council. But that's not, there was never a report considered by council as was directed to city staff to produce. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Matlow. Other speakers on this item?
I'll speak.
Speaker Nunziata.
Oh, I'm sorry, Councillor Holiday, did you want to speak first? Okay, I do have a motion. That this item be deferred indefinitely. You know, what I don't appreciate is Councillor Matlow accusing staff of making errors and not trusting staff. Like, that really disturbs me because this is not the first time Councillor Matlow has done that. So as my motion, I'm moving this item indefinitely. And you know, the proponent has done a great job at Casa Loma. I wish I had Casa Loma in my ward. I mean, it would be amazing for my community, and something that the city and the community can be very proud of. And Councillor Matlow's constituents should be very proud of having Casa Loma in their community. It benefits, you know, in terms of tourism, economic development, and so on. This Casa Loma has been going on for many, many years, before Councillor Matlow was even on council. And we should be very proud on what's being done at Casa Loma and the millions of dollars that have been invested. And I know people from all over Toronto and people coming in, tourists coming into Toronto, the first thing they want to go to is Casa Loma, you know, when we have visitors coming from outside. There was a consultation prior to the issuing of the 2015. And it may not have been what the council thought, but staff did meet these requirements. And I think in realizing the finalization of the Austin Terrace North site may not have been on the top priority of the staff because of the pandemic and the restrictions. It was very difficult. And I do want to commend the hard work that Mike Williams did put into it. And Cheryl, you've done an amazing job on it. And I want to thank you for an amazing job that you've done. And this operator, I commend this operator, is doing an excellent job. And the best solution is to, going forward, as far as I asked that question to staff, is to complete the agreement and then continue to work with the community as they have done in the past few years. So that's my motion, Mr. Chair, and thank you very much.
May I speak to the deferral?
Thank you.
Thank you, Speaker Nunziata. Questions of the mover?
And I just
Councillor
speaking to
Matlow?
the deferral, the 2 minutes for the deferral.
Sorry, you want to speak to the deferral? Okay.
Yes, please. Thank you. If you support Councillor Nunziata's motion to defer.
Actually, sorry, just a moment, Councillor Matlow. Sorry, Matthew, can you refresh my memory? Can you speak to a deferral at the committee level? Matthew Green?
Hi, Chair. Sorry, I was just out of the room on a phone call. Could you repeat the question, please?
Sorry, Councillor Speaker Nunziata moved a motion to defer this item indefinitely. Can we speak to a deferral motion at committee, or is it just questions of the mover?
No, I think this is a deferral. It's still a deferral debate. So you can ask questions of the mover first, and then you can speak to the deferral.
Okay, thank you. So questions of the mover?
Wants to speak on the deferral, so he has 2 minutes.
Yeah.
That's
Councillor Matlow?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Colleagues, Councillor Nunziata, through you, Mr. Chair, suggested that in some way it is wrong for a councillor to even suggest that city staff can make errors. And that somehow everything that city staff say is always correct, that somehow everything that they write is written as though they are written on stone tablets on the top of Mount Sinai that we cannot question, that a mere nod at council means that it's the right thing to do, and then a different type of look means that we shouldn't support it. I believe that a core component of the role of city councillor is to provide oversight and accountability. And when I first heard about this question, this issue around the restaurant, I didn't know where it would take us. But I I submit to you respectfully that if you vote to defer this indefinitely, which means to send it off into outer space, never to be seen again, you know what that means? Then we are not doing our jobs to provide that oversight that we are elected to provide and to demand accountability. This is not about any one individual. This is not about any one staff member. It is not about one company, and it never has been. Now, some of them have made it about them, but that's certainly not the intention of the motion, nor is it my intent. I don't believe the process was followed correctly. I'm not convinced that there was ever any report produced, written, or submitted to City Council prior to the issuance of the RFP. I don't believe that the meetings that staff referred to in 2012 have any bearing on a council resolution that was passed in 2013.
Councillor Matlow, can you wrap up, please?
With the 30 seconds I have remaining, I ask us, why are we here? What are we doing here? And if you simply just defer this and put it out of existence, then we are turning a blind eye to the correct implementation of an RFP and ignoring council's resolution. I think it would be wrong, and I ask you to do the right thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Other speakers on the deferral?
May I speak to the deferral, Mr. Chair?
Yep, Deputy Mayor Holliday.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, I'm reading the words that are before me because a lot of this activity, transactions, discussion reports, I think occurred even before the time I was councillor, going back a couple of terms. But the direction before us says City Council direct the City Manager to fulfill Part 6 of City Council's decision on item 2013 EX 35.2 and then report to this committee next year. Then I read what 6 says. So the extract, which has been conveniently put in here, it just says City Council request that the Casa Loma Corporation review options for the north portion of Casa Loma Complex, including consideration of an issuance of an request for expression of interest, and in doing so, identify a vision and uses for the north portion. And it goes on B, C, and D, ensure the vision and uses proposed are complementary and preclude the sale of city-owned lands and provide the review process. I won't read it all, it's already in the records. But I'm not really sure what utility there is in telling the city manager to fulfill a request that was made of the corporation. In fact, I'm not even sure this is in order because the place to ask the Casa Loma Corporation is at their AGM. They're the ones that ran the RFP, and here we are, fast forward several years later, whether you consider 2013 as your benchmark, or 2015, or the last AGM report, which I read from, which says that this stuff was done. And it says it over and over and over again in the council minutes. According to Ms. Blackman, it's been contained in the report, and I saw at least 2 in the few minutes I had here. So, Councillor Matlow has questions. I appreciate them. They're very detailed. They're about something in that part of the city, but I'm not really sure this is the place for it. Those questions need to go to the corporation, and they deal with something in the past. What I am worried about is the situation, especially from a legal perspective, if we have an awarded RFP and ongoing negotiations on that. So I asked Ms. Blackman for the advice. The advice I got was allow them to do their work. And I understand that there's an avenue for the community concerns to come forward, which I think is important because you've got a venue in the neighborhood, you got a city museum next to it, which I noticed, by the way. There's a lot going on here, so I understand the work of a councillor's hands are full in this neighborhood. But I really hope a process unfolds, but I'm not sure that issuing direction to the city manager to bring a report about something several years ago that was before an RFP is going to help us. I think there needs to be a focus on what's here and now, which is that ongoing negotiation in that process to feed in community questions, concerns, ideas, whatever it needs to go into informing that relationship between the Casa Loma Corporation and their tenant. So I'm going to support the deferral.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Holliday. Other speakers on the deferral? Seeing none. Sorry, Matthew, do we vote on the deferral now or at the end of speeches?
If there are no more speakers to the deferral, this is the time to vote on the deferral motion.
Okay, all right. So we have a deferral motion before us by Speaker Nunziata.
I'd like a recorded vote, please, Mr. Chair.
Okay, we're having a recorded vote on Speaker Nunziata's motion.
Okay, this is a recorded vote on a motion to defer this item indefinitely. All in favor, please. Councillor Ainsley, Councillor Nunziata, Deputy Mayor Holliday. All opposed? Councillor Matlow, Councillor Fillion. Mr. Chair, there have been 3 votes in favor and 2 votes against. Councillor Mantas, you've joined us. How do you vote, please, Councillor Mantas?
Sorry, Matthew, in favor of the motion.
Okay, Mr. Chair, once again, that is 4 votes in favor and 2 votes against. The motion to defer indefinitely carries.
Okay, thank you. All right, our next item, sorry, Matthew, there's not a deputant on number 33, correct?
Yeah, that is correct. That was, we had someone listed there, but they are city staff ready to answer questions on that item.
Okay, not a problem. So we are now going back to, so we're done with all the deputants, items with deputants. So we're going back to GL 32.3, which was a 9:45 a.m. hearing, cancellation, reduction, or refund of property taxes as of July 4th, 2022 hearing. I believe, Matthew, that you were preparing a motion for the committee to consider.
Yeah, we will place that motion up here.
Thank you.
And, received. Sorry, just give us 1 second, Mr. Chair. Sorry about this.
Yep, not a problem.
Sorry about that, Mr. Chair. We're just getting ready to just.
That's okay.
Yeah, just had to recreate that quickly. 1 second.
Right, so there is a motion on the screen that recommendation number 1 be amended to read as follows. The General Government Licensing Committee approve the individual tax appeal applications made pursuant to Section 323 of the City of Toronto Act 2006, resulting in tax deductions, excluding phased-in and capping amounts identified in the detailed hearing report, marked as Appendix A, excluding the following application, located in Ward 8, appeal number 202-20299, or commonly known as 73 Marmion Avenue. If there are any questions of the mover, seeing none, all in favor of the amendment?
Chair? It's Stephen Holliday.
Deputy Mayor Holliday?
If I may just get an explanation, just so I understand fully, and I respect that there may have been some assistance in writing that motion, but I thought that that property was being deferred, or either that or referred back to staff.
Yeah.
Does
so
this
basically
action
what this,
bring closure to the decision on that property, or still allow the the property owner to work with staff to get their needs dealt with.
Yeah, so what my motion does in the legalese term is adjourn that address from this motion.
It does.
So it refers it back to staff so that staff have the opportunity to work with the deputant on this tax status of the property. And then once that is determined, staff will bring this back for another public hearing to be officially resolved by this committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome. All right, item is amended. The amendment before us, all in favor? That carries. Item is amended. All in favor? That carries. Thank you. Our next item is GL 32.9, 2021 Annual Controllers Report. Councillor Filion, you held this item. Questions of staff?
Mr. Chair, sorry to interrupt, Councillor Fillion, but at this point, are we moving a motion to extend to complete, or because it's close to 12:30?
All right, I'm fine with finishing. So we have 4 items left. One of those, it's technical amendment number 35. So if it's the will of the committee, I can move a motion to extend to finish.
Mr. Chair, I'm still working on one part of a motion for item number 19, and might need a short break to do that, or might not if we move other things before it.
Okay, so why don't we do number 19 last, and we'll see where you are with that.
Okay, so
Thank you.
I'll move that motion, Mr. Chair, then.
Okay. Speaker Nunziata is moving a motion to finish the agenda. All in favor? And that carries. We are on GL 32.9, 2021 Annual Controllers Report, held by Councillor Filion. Councillor Filion, questions of staff?
Yes, you know what, I can really combine this and the next item probably with some, you know what, I'll ask a question of Mr. Flynn. So Mr. Flynn, we were, I think, talking at a briefing about that perhaps as part of your work, you could try to build in some different ways of approaching things, or to avoid a situation where we get into contracts that we need to extend because there's nobody else that can provide the product. Is that would you consider that a legitimate concern, and do you have suggested wording to perhaps deal with that?
So through you, Chair, to the councillor, you can hear me?
Yes.
So certainly, Councillor Filion, as part of the 5-year review of the purchasing bylaw, we did discuss ways that we could address the non-competitive procurement approach to ensure that there are circumstances like you've identified where we become reliant upon the ongoing relationship with the supplier. We could certainly look at, as part of that review, addressing that risk for you.
Thank you. And then, Mr. Chair, I don't need to ask anyone else, and I could, if there's no other questions, I could speak and move a motion.
Okay, I will check. Are there any other speakers on this item? Seeing none, Councillor Filion, the floor is yours.
Thank you, and perhaps clerks can put up the motion. Direct that the controller, as part of the purchasing bylaw review, to consider ways to tighten the use of non-competitive contracts, especially in circumstances where the non-competitive contracts create a dependency that prevents the city from entering into competitive contracts in the future. So we've seen this in a number of instances, large and small, at the committee. Everything from, I think there was, I recall a situation where there was only one company that could service vehicles because they were the only ones that had the parts or the know-how. I forget some of the details. From that to the SAP item that is coming up, and I probably can address my concerns with that here. It's just an example of that where even though we're not technically locked into a certain provider, it becomes so difficult to change providers that you are in effect locked in. And even though the staff say we can still negotiate those contracts, which we do, we are put in a position where, you know, it's pretty hard to negotiate when you don't have an alternative supplier to use as leverage. So, you know, I have a big concern about that and how much extra that might cost the city. So rather than deal with it on each item that comes up, which, you know, for which there's always, you know, a reason why we have to move ahead quickly or something, that it's very hard to deal with it on a contract by contract basis because we get ourselves in that box. So Mr. Flynn suggested this approach, and I'm happy to go with it.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Fillion.
May I
Questions
speak?
of the mover? Deputy Mayor Holliday?
May I just speak, Mr. Chair? And that is only to compliment Councillor Fillion for an excellent motion. This is something that I've expressed at committee before in more than one forum, that we need to go into our procurements with our eyes as wide as possible and with as much evidence of due diligence and the preparation of business case as possible and as practical to insert into a council report, because I know there's a lot that goes on within the Toronto Public Service that doesn't make it to the cut before us. But I think that's important for transparency and for public perception of what we do at the city. But I've always understood this, that, you know, there are times when it is appropriate to go to a single supplier, but you have to really think those decisions through and you have to document them so that everybody understands. And I always, like, the simplest way I could express it is, you know, back in the 80s, if the city was choosing between VHS and Beta, and pardon me, there will be some young folks that are listening that wouldn't understand that, but I think my committee members understand the difference between the two technologies. It wasn't about buying a bunch of VCRs at the time. It was about buying the VCRs and then sticking with the brand because you had to, because you've already started to build a fleet, and then hiring the technicians and buying the blank video cassettes that follow that brand in that format, and you're stuck with it for a long time, and you hope you get the right decision. But when you made the first purchase of the fleet of VHS players, you wanted to make sure that you chose the right one and that you understood the bigger implications. And unfortunately, sometimes these reports come in little pieces. And if you weren't there for the very first one, you don't necessarily know or understand whether or not that big picture was thought through, at least by council that was approving it. So I feel strongly that we can always do better with more content in our reports regarding the rationale of going to one supplier, but also being really conscious in the design of the procurement. I mean, this is before it comes to council, but just thinking through the seed of the idea of how we as an organization are going to buy something and how we're going to be constantly looking at it to make sure that we always have an off-ramp and we always have a spirit of competition and ability to make changes as we go along to the extent possible. But we also recognize there are some cases when you make a choice, you stick with it for very, very good business reasons. And so once again, I'll thank Councillor Fillion for putting the motion that I think many of us think through when we see these decisions, and encourage people to put more content into the reports to help us through this process and to help the public who view these reports keep council and government accountable. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Holliday. Other speakers on this item? So we have a motion before us from Councillor Fillion. All in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, that passes. Item is amended. All in favor? Seeing none opposed, and that carries. Councillor Filion, you held the next item, non-competitive contracts with SAP Canada Incorporated for proprietary system software services and licenses. Questions of staff?
Yes, well, I'd held this item just to kind of probe at the issue that I raised with the last item. So I think I don't need to do that. If others have questions, I may join in, but otherwise I'm okay.
Okay, thank you. Do others have questions of staff on this item? Seeing none, Councillor Filion, did you want to move the recommendations?
No, I'd rather not move them.
All right, I will move the recommendations then. All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none opposed, that carries. Councillor Filion, we are on number 19, bulk room accommodations agreement at 3 Parkholme Avenue in Ward 18.
Is it the last item, Mr. Chair?
No, I got one more.
If you could do the other one first, that would be great.
All right.
Mr. Chair, sorry to interrupt. Well, we did not have a speaker on 33. We still have to move that one. We still have to adopt that one.
I had questions.
35.
Yes, my apologies. Thank you, Matthew. Appreciate the reminder. GL 32.33 is our next item, occupational health and safety record for end of year 2021. Does anybody have any questions on this item?
I do, Mr. Chair. It's Stephen Holliday.
Deputy Mayor Holliday, you have the floor.
Thank you. Hopefully we've got staff available. Without the report open in front of me, I'm going to go by memory, but there were some interesting things in this report that showed fairly significant increases, especially in the table that talks about the different departments and the lost time injuries. And some of them were even due to infection and so on. And I just wondered, it's a similar question to the previous one that I asked on our human rights report. If there's a way in the future to separate out trends that may be related to COVID-19 as a very specific item so that we as a council understand, there's this big influence from what was happening in the world over the last couple of years, and we can separate that from the background, from the trends, other trends that may also have something going on that requires our attention.
Yes, through the chair, I can confirm that we'll do a better job of breaking those down in the report so that council can better understand the impacts of COVID-19.
And Mr. Malloy, just to confirm, I don't think you didn't do a great job, but I just if you can help us as a council see that. And if I may ask the other question, was there anything in here that you would like to draw council's attention to with respect to trends of increased injuries that may not have to do with COVID that we can't see because of the overarching movement of the numbers due to that one big issue?
I have nothing specific through the chair, but I will ask my colleague from Occupational Health and Safety to see if there were any other concerning trends that they wanted to draw our attention to.
Okay. I'm satisfied with the reports, and if staff can confirm that they'll endeavor to elaborate, which they did, Mr. Chair, I'm satisfied with the report, and I have no further questions.
Okay, thank you, Deputy Mayor Holliday. Are there other councillors on the committee that have questions on number 33? Seeing none, Deputy Mayor Holliday, would you like to speak or move the recommendations in the report?
Again, I'll speak really briefly. Other than, I think as a council and as an organization as a whole, we should keep our eye on these reports. Obviously, COVID has an impact, right? The infection piece is the one that comes to mind first, but the other thing to think about is we have a big chunk of the workforce that was sent to work from home using login devices. And I think as we continue to reshape physically our workplace and think about where people physically occupy space and conduct their day-to-day work, we need to keep an eye on trends that occur with respect to lost time injuries and the health and safety of our employees. So anything that the staff can do to take the next cut of data is encouraged by me. And I'm not going to place a motion because I think I've made my point in the questions, but you know, there's a little bit of noise that's added to this data because we had this virus circulating that was infecting people. And clearly in here, you see there's some, you know, perhaps there's some injuries. I'm going to read into the numbers a little bit as a result of that. There's lost time. But, you know, I think the question is, you know, did we have injuries because people ended up working from home or because their workplace was different or things were different? And as an organization, I think we should be mindful of those trends as we make other decisions that affect our workplace and how we shape the physical location of the Toronto Public Service. So I will thank staff for this report because I believe it's valuable, but also that further analysis is, I think, something that council needs and the organization needs. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Holliday. Other speakers on this item? Seeing none, so we have the recommendation before us that the City Council receive the end of year 2021 Occupational Health and Safety Report for information. All in favor? And that carries. Our next item is GL 32.35, proposed N-Wave Geothermal District Energy System, Bloor and Kipling. I held this because I have a technical amendment that staff have asked me to move. I can put that on the floor. And then if anybody has any questions, myself or staff, we can go from there. And the technical amendments, revised motion with the technical amendments are on the screen. Any questions of myself or staff? Hearing and seeing none, all in favor of the amendment? That carries. All in favor of the item as amended? That carries. Thank you. We are going back to item number 19. Councillor Filion, are you ready?
Yes, I think we're ready to go. I do have a large number of motions to move, and I'm asking questions just kind of to set those up or explain the reasoning for them, I guess.
I'm sorry, just so everybody understands in the public, we're on GL 32.19, bulk room accommodations agreement at 3 Parkhome Avenue in Ward 18. Councillor Filion, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you. So I'm concerned about some of the costs that are in the staff report and just want to probe at that. So it's I guess of either SSHA or CREM, whoever is the right person to answer. But I'll start with just kind of, am I correct that the number of rooms is 260 and that we would intend to use, say, 10% of those for administrative or other reasons, which would leave 90% of 260. So there would be about 234 rooms approximately for people to be living in. Does that sound right?
Through the speaker to you, Councillor, yes, that might be a little bit on the high side, but 230 is in the ballpark. That's right, to accommodate in total between 600 and 700 people.
Okay, so that's what I was going to get at, was between 200 and 700 people, and that's based on a certain number per room on average?
Yeah, that's based on, the use of this hotel will primarily be driven by sheltering refugee families, with about 100 of the rooms left to support refugee claimant singles, and those rooms would be double occupancy. We anticipate the average room occupancy to be 3 or just below 3 based on family size.
And when would you expect that people would be
moving in, and how long would it take until the space is more or less full?
Through the chair to you, Councillor, we expect to open this property on or around the 1st of September, and we anticipate it would take between 6 and 8 weeks to fully occupy as we move people into the space.
Okay, so switching to the terms of the lease, so I'm guessing maybe this switches to Allison. Under the terms of this lease, we are required to pay for 100% of the rooms from day one. Is that for a 5-year period? Is that correct?
Councillor, through the chair, yes, that's correct.
So I guess first question is, does that make sense when we know that certainly for a period of a month or two, we will be well below capacity. So we will be paying for rooms that we already know that we won't be using.
Thanks, Councillor. Through the chair, we always try to ensure that we are not paying for rooms that are not being used. I think there's a distinction between rooms that are anticipated to be used and rooms that are not. But in all instances, we do try to make sure that we are only paying for rooms that are being used. So we should be seeking some additional flexibility in that area.
And with meals, is it is the cost based on individuals eating, or is that in any way related to occupancy? Other than, or is that related to number of rooms? Like, so if a room is not occupied, I assume that that means there is no meal costs related to that room. Would that be right?
Through the chair, yes, you are correct. Meals are based on actual meals ordered and used, and not based on any sort of room number or count.
Okay, so I wanted to go to the numbers in the report where the costs were outlined, and there was an amount for catering for meals that doesn't kind of coincide with the numbers I get when I multiply 600 or 700 people times the dollar amount per day. Can you explain that discrepancy?
Thanks, Councillor. Through the chair, the catering estimate in the report is based on single occupancy, which is the typical manner in which we have reported catering costs for shelter hotel agreements of this nature. We have continued to work with the hotel operator on the catering contract and anticipate reporting back to council with a supplemental report in July that reflects some of the changes we've been able to achieve on the catering contract. At that time, we will update the estimated catering costs to reflect the anticipated total occupancy, just given the unique nature of this site being not appropriately, the single occupancy number may not be the most appropriate number to use.
Yes, no, thank you. And thank you for during this week kind of working with me to try to sort this out. So would it be fair to say that the actual numbers will be higher than is in the chart in the report, but there is an opportunity to reduce our overall food costs without compromising on the quality or the quantity available to the people who be living there?
Thanks, Councillor. Through the chair, yes, that is correct.
Okay, that's great. And
last question, Councillor.
Yeah, last question for now anyway. So I understand that the federal government typically picks up the tab. What would happen, because it's a refugee program, what would happen in the event that we experienced another significant decline in the number of refugees for whatever world conditions like we did in the pandemic, would the federal government still pick up the tab, or would they not, because they would base how much they reimburse us on the number of refugees actually housed in the building?
Through the chair, Councillors Gord Tanner here. So, we have been receiving federal funding for our refugee response since 2017. And, in the unanticipated event that borders were to close again, we would have the option to wind down operations at different locations and concentrate on housing refugee claimants at this one site at 3 Park Home. Even during the lowest numbers of refugee claimants that we were serving during the pandemic, the numbers were still well over 500, 600 people. So, we would focus on that. In an alternative, we could look at housing families at this location who are non-refugee claimants to provide them shelter as that demand has continued. But ultimately, we want to get to a place where we are, have a proactive relationship with the federal government, and they are providing us funding on an annual basis for this expense that we continue to incur in the City of Toronto, and those intergovernmental conversations continue.
Thank you. I have a related question, Mr.
Sorry,
Chair.
Councillor
That it's,
Filion, you're at over 8 minutes now.
well, okay, whatever. I'll come back for a second round then.
Okay. Does anybody else have questions of staff on this item? Seeing none, Councillor Filion, you wanted a second round?
Yeah, just to follow up on that, Mr. Tanner, I think you're aware, I've made you aware that there are some concerns in the community that there would be a change in use as happened at 5800, where it was initially a location for refugees and then got switched to a homeless shelter without anybody, including me, knowing anything about that. So wanted to ask you, because there's community concerns that the same would happen here. Can you give us your opinion on the appropriateness of this site and for a large homeless shelter, and whether the community needs to be concerned about that switch possibly happening in the future?
Through the chair to you, Councillor. So, we, during the pandemic, took, action in a number of cases to save lives and achieve physical distancing in the base shelter system, which did mean that we changed the focus of some of our shelters, in the case that you're referencing, 5800 Yonge, from serving refugee claimants to serving folks who are non-refugee claimants to provide them shelter. This project at 3 Park Home is a large hotel site, 260 rooms. It is our intention to populate it with families, and we don't often house singles alongside families in the shelter system. And if demand was to drop, we would look to backfill some of the space with non-refugee families, as I mentioned. It is a large location, and through strategic reports we've brought to council, we anticipate the size of a regular shelter that integrates well into the community is in the range of about 80 beds for singles. And so at this point, I can tell you it's not our intention to change the use of this site in the future, but of course I can't speak to global events, the likes of which were brought to us with COVID-19.
Okay, thank you. And if requested, would you be okay with providing those assurances to the community that this site is basically too large for that kind of a use at this location, and that the intention is it would be for refugee families or
if it needed to be sub together than refugee families, it would be homeless families.
Certainly, that's something that we could speak to at our community engagement sessions, which we're working with your office on currently.
Okay, thank you. Those are my questions.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Filion. Speakers on this item?
I have some motions which the clerk can put up. And I'm glad to go through them. The first kind of group relates to the food service, and I want to say it's really been I have found senior staff very easy to deal with this week on all of these issues, and I'm expecting a positive outcome on most or all of what's in here. So the I think we can do a lot better in how much we're paying for the food at this location, given that it will include a lot of children who do not eat nearly as much. It will include, I'm sure, some infants and very young children who eat very little. And I think we can do a lot better with the food costs with the same quality. I think staff can come up with ways so that there is flexibility so that the food can be both culturally appropriate and some of the meals can be had at the same cost to the city at neighboring businesses, or those businesses can bring food in. So I tried not to be too specific on any of that, just talked about greater flexibility, that we not be bound to anything long term if it is not working. I'm looking that to kind of safeguard the city's long-term commitment here, to make sure that hopefully that the federal government will fund this as a long-term location so that the city isn't on the hook if something happens, because it is a 5-year deal with guaranteed 100% occupancy. And I'm looking for us to perhaps negotiate a bit better so that we're not paying for rooms that we know we won't be using, such as at the beginning, we'll be moving people in gradually, and certainly doesn't make a whole lot of sense from the city's point of view to be paying for 100% of the rooms during that initial period. Moving further down, Matthew, if you're able to scroll down, I'm not able to adjust my screen.
Sorry, that was the end of that motion. I think the
Yeah,
rest is on
okay.
this next one.
So then the second part just deals with direction to the general manager, SSHA. And again, this reflects several long conversations about this so that we can really take advantage of this location, which is directly connected to the library, directly connected to Douglas Snow Aquatic Center, is a block away from the Meridian Arts Center. And there is, in the Meridian Arts Center, you have North York Arts. So there's really an opportunity to do a lot of programming here and recreation here. There is lots of good space on the bottom several floors, and so there's really an opportunity to do this properly, and with the food savings that I'm anticipating in that cost, we can even putting a small amount of that towards some of these partnerships, we can really provide an excellent program for the residents there, because this, it is a large site in a very densely populated area. There will certainly be major challenges, for example, in finding school accommodation for literally hundreds of children when all of the very local schools are already full. But, you know, I'm sure we will figure something out, but we really need to put a lot of resources into making this work properly. And I think this is a very good location, provided the attention and the resources are put into it. And recommendation 2 is just kind of formalizing what I asked Mr. Tanner about. You know, it is important in my ability to sell this to the community that they are not suspicious that this is going to get switched on them. And, you know, this is, I think, for all the reasons I've given, this is a good site for refugees. It is, and it's a bit, you know, too large for my liking, but I think we could make it work. The same would not be true if other uses were to come in. So, thank you.
Mr. Chair, you're on mute.
Thanks, Matthew. Questions of the mover? Not seeing any questions of the mover. Other speakers on this item? Seeing none, so we have the motions before us by Councillor Filion. All in favor of the motions? Any opposed? Seeing none, item is amended. All in favor? Seeing no opposed, that carries. And I believe, Matthew, that was our last item?
That it was our last item, yes.
All right. And I believe we have the bills.
That is correct.
And just before we do the bills, I would be remiss. I just wanted to thank, as we finish up, this is our last meeting. I just wanted to thank my Chief of Staff, Antoinette DeNovo, for the work that she's done assisting me and making sure this runs smoothly, reaching out not only to councillors on the committee, but any councillors that have items on the agenda to get their feedback or see if they have any concerns or issues. I'd like to thank her for all of that work. And to Councillor Filion, I would also like to thank him as he's about to have a retirement from City Council. I'd like to thank him for all of his work. I think this is your second go around on General Licensing Committee while I've been the chair. I'd just like to thank you, Councillor Filion, for all of your work and dedication and input on behalf of the committee, looking out for the needs of the city and your ward when issues come up in your ward. And I hope you have a long, happy, healthy retirement with your family. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And Matthew, if you have the bills on the screen. Councillor Filion, would you like to move the bills?
Be glad to. That the general, do I need to read them out?
Yes, you do.
That the General Government and Licensing Committee pass and declare as a bylaw confirmatory bill to confirm the legislative proceedings of the General Government and Licensing Committee acting under delegated authority at meeting 32 held on July 4th, 2022.
All in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none opposed, that carries. And a motion to adjourn. Councillor Mansis.
Mr. Chair, before we go, can I offer a round of applause for you, sir, and for the clerk's staff, and Mr. Green especially, for all of everyone's work in making this committee work over the term.
Thank you, everybody. All in favor of adjournment? And that carries. Thank you very much. I hope everybody has a great day. Enjoy the rest of your day. And once again, thank you for all your work on the General Government Licensing Committee. Thank you so much.